culinary chef laughed at the man who entered the cooking course. Then he silenced him right away. Robert Johnson held the paper with the address of the cooking school while his hands trembled slightly. At 65, he never imagined he'd be there, about to step into a professional kitchen to learn something he'd always left to his late wife, Margaret. "Are you sure this is the right place?" the receptionist asked, eyeing the grey-haired man with some suspicion. "Yes, miss, I signed up for the basic cooking course. Robert Johnson Smith," he replied, adjusting the dress shirt he'd chosen especially for the first day. The woman typed something into the computer and then looked back at him, as if double-checking for a mistake. "Ah, found it. You're in the afternoon group with Chef Michael. It's down the hall, first door on the left." Robert thanked her and walked down the corridor, breathing in the scent of spices wafting from the kitchen. Every step reminded him of Margaret, who always said she wanted to see him cook at least once in his life. She'd passed 8 months ago, and since then, Robert had survived on ready-made meals and dishes his neighbor, Mrs. Betty, insisted on making for him. When he pushed open the kitchen door, he was met with a modern space, all stainless steel, industrial ovens, and massive countertops. About 12 people were scattered around the kitchen, most of them young in their 20s or 30s. Robert felt completely out of place. "Hey, everyone!" a voice called out behind him. Robert turned and saw a young man, around 32, wearing a spotless chef's uniform with the traditional hat. "I'm Chef Michael, and I'll be your instructor for the next 3 months." The chef paused when his eyes landed on Robert, standing awkwardly in the middle of the kitchen. "Hi, sir, are you lost?" "The senior center is upstairs," Michael said, drawing giggles from some of the younger students. "Actually, I'm enrolled here." "Robert Johnson Smith," Robert replied, feeling his face flush with embarrassment. Michael glanced at the list in his hand and then raised his eyebrows in surprise. "Really? Well, all right then, but I'll warn you right now, this isn't a walk in the park. No retirement hobbies here," the chef quipped, sparking more laughter. Robert swallowed hard and looked for a place to stand. A blonde woman in her mid-20s named Jennifer motioned for him to come over. "You can stand here, Mr. Robert. I'm Jennifer, a culinary student," she said with a kind smile. "Thank you, dear," Robert replied, positioning himself beside her. Michael clapped his hands to get everyone's attention. "All right, folks, today we're starting with the basics. I'll teach you how to make a basic tomato sauce. Sounds simple, but you'll see there's technique involved," the chef said, already moving to the main counter. Robert paid attention to every word, every movement. Michael explained with ease, but whenever he glanced Robert's way, he couldn't resist a sarcastic remark. "And it's important not to burn the garlic, everyone, especially for those with tired eyes," he said, looking straight at Robert, who pretended not to hear. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out as we're just starting. Now, back to the story. When it was time to get hands-on, Robert moved to one of the smaller counters in the corner. He gathered the ingredients: tomatoes, garlic, onion, olive oil, salt, and pepper. His hands shook slightly as he picked up the knife to chop the onion. "Careful there, Grandpa, don't cut yourself," Michael called from across the kitchen, sparking more laughter. Robert took a deep breath and began chopping the onion. No matter how hard he tried to follow the instructions, his slices came out uneven and a bit crooked. Beside him, Jennifer cut with precision, just like the other younger students. "Having trouble, Mr. Robert?" Jennifer asked quietly. "A little, dear. I've never done this before," he admitted, feeling more and more inadequate. Michael walked over to Robert's workstation and watched him work. "Wow, what a massacre. Looks like the onion fought you and lost," the chef said, picking up a poorly cut piece. "Look at this. How are you supposed to make a decent sauce with this chop?" Robert felt his face burn with shame. All the other students stopped what they were doing to watch. "I can try again," Robert said, his voice slightly shaky. "Oh, sure you can, except now everyone has to wait for you to finish," Michael replied, crossing his arms. "Everyone, take a break while our friend here learns how to use a knife." The silence that followed was awkward. Robert wanted to run out of there, but something inside him, maybe the memory of Margaret, made him stay. He grabbed a new onion and started over, this time trying to go slower. Jennifer stepped closer and whispered, "Hold the knife like this and use your other hand to guide it, you'll get it." With her help, Robert managed better cuts, though it still took him twice as long as the others. Michael let out a loud sigh, showing his impatience. "All right, everyone, now let's sauté, oil in the pan and—" Michael stopped and looked at Robert. "Mr. Robert, you know what sautéing is, right?" "I do. Well, sort of," Robert stammered. "Sort of?" Michael laughed loudly. "Guys, look at this. The man signs up for a cooking course without even knowing what sautéing is." Robert poured the oil into the pan and turned on the heat. When the oil was hot, he dumped the onion in all at once, making a loud sizzle and splattering oil everywhere. "Oh my God!" Michael shouted, rushing over. "Are you trying to fry the whole kitchen? Look at this mess." Indeed, Robert's workstation was a disaster. Oil had splattered everywhere, the onion was burning in spots, and he didn't know what to do. "Take it easy, Mr. Robert," Jennifer said, lowering the heat and helping him stir. "No, no, no," Michael interrupted. "Everyone does their own. If he can't handle it, that's his problem." Michael turned off the burner under Robert's pan. "That's it. You're done for today. Just watch." "I think that's best," the chef said with a sarcastic smile. Robert stood there, feeling completely humiliated. The other students avoided looking at him, clearly embarrassed by the situation. Only Jennifer occasionally gave him a sympathetic glance. The rest of the class went by with Robert just observing. Michael demonstrated each step, always commenting on how important it was to have a knack for cooking and how not everyone was born to be in the kitchen. When class ended, Robert was one of the first to leave. Jennifer ran after him in the hallway. "Mr. Robert, wait," she called. "Don't be upset about what happened today. Everyone struggles at first." "Thank you, dear. You're very kind," Robert replied, forcing a smile. "But maybe I'm just not cut out for this." "Nonsense. You just need a little practice at home. I can give you some tips if you'd like." Robert thanked her and left the school feeling defeated. On the bus ride home, he wondered if he should just give up. Margaret always said he had a knack for everything, but maybe she was just being sweet. When he got home, he went straight to the kitchen and looked at the utensils he'd bought especially for the course. All brand new, unused. He grabbed an onion from the fridge and a knife, determined to try again. 2 hours later, he had chopped 4 onions and made an unparalleled mess in the kitchen. But the last slices were much better than the first. Robert smiled for the first time that day. "See, Margaret? You can still learn new things," he said, looking at his wife's photo on the fridge. The next day, Robert arrived at school earlier. He wanted to show Michael he wasn't a lost cause. He had practiced at home and felt more confident. "Look who's here early today, our grandpa," Michael said when he saw him entering the kitchen. "Excited for another disaster class?" "Good morning, Chef. I practiced at home yesterday," Robert replied, trying to keep his composure. "Oh yeah, how many onions did you massacre?" Michael asked, drawing laughter from some students who had already arrived. The day's lesson was about basic vegetable cuts. Michael gave a flawless demonstration, slicing carrots, celery, and potatoes with impressive speed and precision. "Now it's your turn. Remember, even cuts, steady hands, and focus," the chef said. Robert went to his usual workstation in the corner and got to work. This time he took it slower, recalling what he had practiced at home. His cuts still weren't perfect, but they were much better than the day before. Michael walked around, praising some and criticizing others. When he reached Robert's station, he stood there watching for a few seconds. A little better," he said, as if acknowledging it were a favor. "But still far from acceptable. Look at these potatoes, all different sizes. How are you supposed to cook like that?" Robert didn't respond, just kept cutting. Michael picked up one of the potatoes he had sliced and showed it to the class. "Everyone, look at this. It's like it was cut with your eyes closed," the chef said, provoking laughter. "This is why professional kitchens hire experienced people, not amateurs." The word amateur stung Robert more than he expected. He stopped cutting and looked at Michael. "Chef, everyone here is an amateur. That's why we came to learn," Robert said, his voice firm for the first time. Michael seemed surprised by the response. "Yeah, but there's amateur, and then there's amateur, right?" Some have potential and some—" He paused, looking at Robert. "Some should have just stayed in their comfort zone." Robert felt his blood boil, but he took a deep breath. Margaret always said elegance was in not stooping to their level. "I understand, Chef. I'll keep trying," he replied, returning to his work. Michael was clearly frustrated he hadn't gotten under Robert's skin and moved on to the next station. At the end of class, while everyone cleaned their stations, Robert approached Michael. "Chef, I was wondering if you offer private lessons." "I'd pay extra," he said. Michael looked at him mockingly. "Private lessons for you?" He laughed loudly. "Listen, Mr. Robert, I'll be honest, you're wasting your time and money here. Cooking isn't for everyone, especially at your age. Why don't you try a knitting class or something?" Robert felt like he'd been punched in the gut, not by the words themselves, but by the cruelty behind them. "I understand your concern, Chef, but I'd like to keep trying," he replied, maintaining his dignity. "Suit yourself," Michael said in English, clearly aiming to humiliate him further. "But don't blame me when you realize it was a waste of time." That night, Robert called his daughter, Emily, who lived in another city. "Hi, Dad. How was class today?" she asked cheerfully. "It was interesting, sweetheart," he replied, not wanting to worry her. "Dad, I know you. What happened?" Robert told her about Michael's behavior, downplaying the situation. Emily was furious. "Dad, this is unacceptable. That man can't treat the students like this. You should file a complaint." "No, honey. Maybe he's right. Maybe I really am too old for this." "Dad, don't ever say that again. Mom would be furious if she heard you talk like that. Remember what she always said? Robert, you can do anything when you set your mind to it." Robert smiled, remembering Margaret's favorite phrase. "That's true, sweetheart. She always said that." "Then don't give up. Show that arrogant chef what you're made of." After the conversation with Emily, Robert felt renewed. He decided he wouldn't give up so easily. He started researching cooking videos online and bought some basic recipe books. In the third class, the topic was basic sauces. Michael was explaining roux, a thickener made with flour and butter. "It's crucial that the flour doesn't burn. If it does, the sauce turns bitter, and you'll have to throw it all out and start over," the chef explained. Robert paid extra attention. He had watched 3 videos about roux the night before and felt more prepared. When it was time for the practical part, he carefully started making his roux. He melted the butter over low heat and gradually added the flour, stirring constantly, just as he'd seen in the videos. "Wow, Mr. Robert, that's looking really good," Jennifer commented, watching his work. Other students also gathered to see. Robert's roux was golden and smooth with the perfect consistency. Michael, who was on the other side of the kitchen, came over to see what was causing such interest. "What's this crowd about?" he asked, approaching. When he saw Robert's roux, his expression changed. It was truly well done. Not bad," he said again in English. "But roux is just the beginning. Let's see if you can make a complete sauce without burning it." Robert continued following the recipe, adding the vegetable broth little by little, stirring constantly to avoid lumps. The sauce was reaching the right consistency, smooth and velvety. Michael watched from a distance, clearly annoyed. When Robert finished, the sauce was perfect. "Can I taste it?" Jennifer asked. Robert served her a spoonful. She took a bite and her eyes widened. "Oh my, this is delicious," she exclaimed. Other students also wanted to try and everyone praised it. Michael walked over with a stern face. "Let me taste that," he said, taking a spoon. Robert held his breath as the chef tried his sauce. Michael chewed slowly, thoughtful. "It's acceptable," he said, clearly forcing the words. "But there's still plenty of room for improvement." Despite the cold response, Robert felt victorious. He had proven he could do something right. At the end of class, several classmates congratulated Robert on his sauce. Jennifer approached him. "Mr. Robert, you really have a knack for this. Don't let the chef discourage you." "Thank you, dear. That's the first time something actually turned out right," Robert laughed. But his joy didn't last long. In the next class, Michael was even more critical of him. "Today, we're making a basic risotto," the chef announced. It's a recipe that requires patience and technique. Not just anyone can do it. As he said this, he looked straight at Robert. The secret to risotto is in the rice's doneness and timing. It's very important not to rush, Michael continued. Robert focused on the explanation, determined to do another good job. When he started preparing the risotto, he followed each step carefully. Sautéed the onion, toasted the rice, added the warm broth, one ladle at a time. Everything was going well until Michael approached his station. "Let me see how it's coming along," the chef said, grabbing a spoon to taste. "It's not ready yet, chef," Robert said. "It needs about 5 more minutes." "I decide when it's ready or not," Michael retorted, tasting the risotto, which was still at the right point. "This has no salt, no seasoning, nothing," he exclaimed loudly enough for the whole class to hear. "How do you intend to serve this tasteless mush to anyone?" Robert was confused. He had seasoned the broth just as Michael had taught. "But chef, I seasoned nothing. This is bland." Once again proving that experience matters, Michael cut him off. "Everyone, come see an example of how not to make risotto." Robert felt his face burn with shame again. But this time, Jennifer stepped forward and asked to taste it too. "Excuse me, chef. May I try?" she asked. Michael made a dismissive gesture as if saying, "Go ahead, taste this garbage." Jennifer took a bite and made a thoughtful face. "Strange, I think it does have seasoning. It's actually quite tasty," she said quietly. Other students also tasted it and agreed the risotto was well seasoned and flavorful. Michael was visibly irritated. "Well, everyone has their own taste, right?" he said, forcing a tone. "But in professional cooking, we can't settle for mediocrity." Robert began to realize that no matter how well he performed, Michael would always find something to criticize. It was personal. After class, he decided to speak with the school administration. He approached the receptionist and asked if he could talk to someone in charge. "Of course, Mr. Robert. Coordinator Sarah is in her office. It's right down the hall." The woman pointed. Robert knocked on the door and entered. Sarah was a friendly, welcoming woman in her 50s. "You're Robert from Michael's class, right?" she asked. "How can I help you?" "Well, Mrs. Sarah, I wanted to talk about some issues happening in the classroom," Robert began, somewhat awkwardly. "Feel free to speak." Robert explained the treatment he'd been receiving from Michael, trying to be as objective as possible. Sarah listened attentively. "I understand your concern, Mr. Robert. I'll speak with Michael about this. Here at the school, we value respect among everyone," she said. "I don't want to cause trouble for anyone. I just want things to be fairer," Robert explained. "You're absolutely right. Thank you for coming to talk to me." Robert left the room feeling better. At least he had done his part. In the next class, Michael was even more aggressive. It was as if he knew Robert had complained about him. "Today we're making fresh pasta," he announced. "It's one of the most basic techniques in Italian cooking. Anyone with minimal competence can do it." The provocation was clear. Michael explained the process. Form a well with the flour, add the eggs in the center, mix until a dough forms, then knead until smooth and elastic. Robert followed the instructions, but his dough kept sticking to the counter and falling apart. "Professor, my dough is too sticky," said a young student named Jason. "Add a little more flour and keep kneading," Michael replied patiently. Robert had the same problem, but when he asked for help, the response was different. "Chef, my dough is also sticking," he said. Michael glanced at Robert's dough and rolled his eyes. "That's not dough, it's flour glue. You must have added too many eggs or not enough flour. You'll have to throw it out and start over," he said coldly. "Can't I just adjust it like Jason did?" Robert asked. "Jason's case is different. His dough can be saved. Yours can't," Michael replied, crossing his arms. Robert had to throw out all the dough and start again. Meanwhile, the other students were already rolling out their dough. "Everyone, don't wait for our slowpoke here. Keep moving forward," Michael said, pointing at Robert. When Robert finally managed to make dough that didn't stick, the class time was already running out. He didn't even get to roll it out properly. "What a shame, Mr. Robert. Another class where you couldn't keep up," said Michael, with fake sympathy in his voice. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. That night, Robert was feeling down. He called Emily again. "Dad, that man is being abusive. This isn't normal," she said, indignant. "Sweetheart, maybe he's right. Maybe I just don't have a knack for this." "Dad, stop talking like that. You know that's not true. Tell Mom what's going on." Robert looked at the photo of Margaret in the living room. "Margaret, my love, I'm trying to fulfill your dream of seeing me cook. But it's hard," he said, as he always did when he was sad. Just then, the doorbell rang. It was Mrs. Betty, his neighbor. "Good evening, Robert. I brought you a lasagna," she said, walking in with a dish. "Thank you so much, Betty. You're always so kind." "How's the cooking class going?" Robert told Mrs. Betty about his struggles, and she listened carefully. "You know what, Robert? That chef is jealous of you," she said. "Jealous of me? How so?" "Think about it. You have the courage to start over at 65. How many people have that kind of determination? He must feel threatened." "Threatened by me? But he's a professional chef." "Exactly. And you're a man who isn't afraid to learn. That bothers small-minded people like him." Mrs. Betty's words made Robert reflect. Maybe she was right. "What do you think I should do?" "Keep going. Don't let him bring you down. Margaret would be proud to see you fighting like this." Mrs. Betty was right. Robert decided he wouldn't give up. In the next class, the theme was soups. Michael explained different types of broth and how each gave a unique base to soups. "A good soup always starts with good broth, that's fundamental," said the chef. Robert paid close attention. When it was time for the practical part, he decided to make a vegetable soup with chicken broth he had prepared at home the night before. "Oh, brought homework, did you?" Michael teased when he saw the container of broth Robert pulled from his bag. "Yes, chef. I made the broth yesterday so I'd have more time to prepare the soup today," Robert replied confidently. Michael didn't like the confident answer, but couldn't criticize the initiative. Robert began preparing his soup, sautéed the vegetables, added the broth and seasonings, and let it simmer for the right amount of time. He was focused and sure of himself. "Can I taste it?" asked Jennifer, always curious to try what he made. "Of course, sweetheart." Jennifer took a bite, and her eyes lit up. "Mr. Robert, this is amazing. Better than many restaurant soups I've had." Other students gathered to taste it too. Everyone praised Robert's soup. Michael, seeing the commotion at Robert's station, walked over. "What's going on here?" he asked. "We're trying Mr. Robert's soup, chef. It's really good," said Jason. Michael took a spoon and tasted the soup. Robert held his breath. Michael's expression changed. It was clear the soup was delicious, but he didn't want to admit it. "It's fine," he said, clearly forcing the words. "But it's too salty." "I didn't find it salty," Jennifer remarked. "Me neither," Jason agreed. Michael turned red with anger. "Well, everyone has their own opinion," he said, walking away. By the end of class, several classmates congratulated Robert on his soup. He was beaming. For the first time since starting the course, he truly felt capable. But Michael wasn't going to let it slide. In the next class, he arrived with a proposal. "Everyone, I'm going to do something different today. We'll have a little practical test," he announced. "Each of you will prepare a basic dish that I'll choose on the spot. It's to see how well you've absorbed the material." The students grew nervous. Robert felt a pit in his stomach. "I'll call you one by one. Jennifer, you'll make a perfect omelette," said Michael. Jennifer made her omelette without any issues. Jason was called to prepare a Piedmont-style rice and also did well. One by one, the students were tested on relatively simple dishes. Finally, it was Robert's turn. "Mr. Robert, you'll prepare..." Michael paused dramatically. "A mushroom risotto." Robert swallowed hard. Risotto was one of the hardest techniques they'd learned. "You have 15 minutes, said Michael, starting the timer. Robert took a deep breath and began. He chopped the onion, separated the mushrooms, heated the broth. He was nervous but tried to remember everything he'd learned. Michael watched the entire time, making loud comments to distract him. "Be careful not to burn the onion. The heat is too high, that mushroom is cut too thick," he remarked constantly. Robert tried to ignore him and focus on what he was doing. He added the rice, toasted it lightly, then began adding the broth one ladle at a time. 10 minutes, Michael warned. The risotto was just right. Robert tasted it, well seasoned, perfectly creamy. He added the sautéed mushrooms, a bit of Parmesan cheese, and finished with chopped parsley. Time, Michael shouted. Robert finished right on time. He was proud of the result. The risotto had turned out well, maybe even better than the one he'd made in the previous class. Michael approached to evaluate. He took a spoonful and tasted it, chewing slowly with a neutral expression. All the students waited in silence for his verdict. Good, Michael began, pausing dramatically. The rice is slightly overcooked, the mushrooms aren't sautéed properly, and it needs more salt. Robert couldn't believe what he was hearing. He knew the risotto was just right. Can I taste it too? Jennifer asked bravely. Michael hesitated, but couldn't refuse without looking ridiculous. Go ahead, he said grudgingly. Jennifer tasted it, then Jason did too. Both confirmed the risotto was delicious and perfectly cooked. Chef, with all due respect, I think it's really good, Jennifer said. Michael grew furious. Look, I'm the one who evaluates here. If you think you know better than me, you're welcome to teach in my place, he snapped. The mood turned tense. It was clear to everyone that Michael was being unfair to Robert. After class, Jennifer found Robert in the hallway. Mr. Robert, this can't go on. The chef is completely biased, she said. I know, dear, but I don't know what else to do. Have you tried talking to him directly? No. I'm afraid of making things worse. It can't get any worse. You cook very well, but he refuses to acknowledge it. Robert decided to take Jennifer's advice. At the end of the next class, he approached Michael after everyone had left. Chef, may I have a word with you? Michael looked at him irritably. What is it now? I'd like to understand why you have such a problem with me. I'm really trying to learn, Robert said, keeping his voice calm. Michael laughed dismissively. A problem with you? I don't have a problem, I'm just being realistic. Realistic how? Look, Mr. Robert, I'll be very clear. You don't have what it takes for this. Cooking is a young, dynamic art. It's not for retirees looking for a hobby, Michael said bluntly. But my dishes turn out well, the other students like them. The other students aren't a technical standard. They don't know what culinary excellence is, Michael cut in. So what can I do to improve? Michael laughed again. Honestly, accepting that not everyone is cut out for everything. You've had a whole lifetime to learn how to cook. Why now, all of a sudden? The question cut deep into Robert. He felt his eyes well up. Because my wife always dreamed of seeing me cook. She passed 8 months ago and I wanted to fulfill that dream for her, he said, his voice trembling. Michael was visibly uncomfortable with the emotional response, but showed no empathy. Well, that's very touching, but sentimentality doesn't make anyone a chef, he said coldly. Robert felt as if he'd been slapped. He left the school that day, feeling completely crushed. At home, he sat in the armchair where he always used to sit with Margaret to watch TV and cried. He cried from missing her, from the humiliation he was enduring, from the overwhelming sense of failure. Margaret, my love, I don't think I can do this, he said to her photo. Maybe he's right, maybe I'm just too old. Just then the phone rang. It was Emily. Hi, Dad. How was class today? Robert couldn't hide the sadness in his voice and told his daughter everything. Emily was furious. Dad, that's bullying. That man has no right to treat anyone like that. Sweetheart, maybe it's better if I just quit. I'm an adult. I don't need to put up with this. Dad, listen to me. Are you really going to give up on Mum's dream because of some prejudiced jerk? She'd be so disappointed. But Emily, no buts. You're going to finish that course, and if I have to, I'll come down there and talk to that chef myself. Emily's determination lifted Robert's spirits. She was right. He couldn't give up on Margaret's dream. Okay, sweetheart. I'll keep going. Good. And Dad, document everything he does. Record the classes if you have to. We might need to file a formal complaint. At the next class, Robert arrived with a new strategy. He decided he wouldn't give Michael another chance to humiliate him. He'd focus on learning and ignore the provocations. The lesson was on stuffed pasta. Michael demonstrated how to make cappelletti and ravioli, showing the technique for rolling the dough thin and cutting perfect squares. Robert paid close attention, and when it was time for hands-on practice, he focused entirely on his work. His dough was smooth and elastic, and he managed to roll it out paper-thin. "Wow, Mr. Robert, your dough is perfect," commented a new student named Sarah. Robert smiled and kept working. He prepared a ricotta and spinach filling, seasoned it with nutmeg and parmesan, and began assembling the ravioli. Michael moved around the workstations, but avoided looking at Robert's. It was obvious the work was good, and he didn't want to admit it. When Robert finished, his ravioli were perfectly sealed and uniform. He dropped them into boiling salted water. "Can I help taste?" asked Jennifer, as usual. "Of course, sweetheart." The ravioli cooked to perfection. Robert served them with a simple butter and sage sauce he'd prepared. Several students tried them and were impressed. "Mr. Robert, you really have a knack for this," said Jason. Michael, noticing the commotion, approached the workstation. "What's going on here? You should be finishing your own dishes," he snapped. "We were just tasting Mr. Robert's ravioli, Chef. They turned out really well," Sarah explained. Michael looked at the ravioli on the plate. He couldn't deny they were well presented. "Let me try," he said, picking up a fork. Robert watched as Michael chewed. The chef's expression was clearly displeased. "The dough is a little too thick," he finally said. "I thought it was just right," Jennifer remarked. "Me too," Jason agreed. "Well, you're still learning," Michael replied. "It's normal not to notice these nuances," said Michael with an air of superiority. But this time, Robert decided to stand his ground. "Chef, could you tell me exactly what's wrong with the thickness of the dough?" he asked calmly. Michael was surprised by the direct question. It's too obvious. Any professional chef would notice." "But could you be more specific so I can improve next time?" Robert insisted. Michael visibly bristled. He couldn't give a technical explanation because there was nothing wrong with the dough. "Look, these are details only experience teaches. In time, you'll understand," he said, dodging the question. Robert realized he'd backed Michael into a corner and felt satisfied. It was the first time he'd managed to challenge the chef's baseless critiques. At the end of class, several classmates congratulated Robert on his ravioli. He was feeling more and more confident, but Michael wasn't about to let it slide. The next class, he arrived with a new humiliation strategy. "Everyone, today we're doing something different. I'll teach you how to fillet a fish," he announced. Robert had never filleted a fish in his life. He always bought them pre-cleaned at the market. "It's a fundamental technique every cook must master," Michael continued, looking straight at Robert. He demonstrated the technique masterfully, showing how to position the knife and make precise cuts to separate the flesh from the bones. "Now you'll practice. Each of you will fillet a sea bream," he said, distributing the fish. Robert stared at the fish on his counter with apprehension. This was nothing like anything he'd done before. He tried to follow Michael's instructions, but his hands trembled slightly, and the cuts didn't turn out as expected. "Chef, I'm having trouble here," said a young student named Amanda. Michael went over and patiently helped her, guiding her hand and correcting her movements. Robert was struggling with the same issue, but when he called for Michael, the response was different. "Chef, I'm having trouble too. Could you help me?" Michael looked at Robert's attempted fillet and grimaced. "That's not filleting, that's butchering. Look how uneven it is, still full of bones," he said loudly for the whole class to hear. "Could you show me where I'm going wrong?" Robert asked. "Where are you going wrong?" "Everywhere. The knife position, the cutting angle, the pressure—" Michael snapped impatiently. "This is about technique, not brute force." Robert felt humiliated again, but this time Jennifer stepped in. "Chef, excuse me, but you helped Amanda when she had the same difficulty. Couldn't you help Robert too?" she said bravely. Michael turned red with anger. "The difference is Amanda has potential to learn, but Robert—" He paused. Some cases are just hopeless. The silence that followed was awkward. It was clear to everyone Michael had crossed a line. Jason spoke up. "Chef, that's not fair. Everyone here is learning." "Who said life is fair?" Michael shot back. "There's no room for sentimentality in a professional kitchen." Robert wanted to run out of there, but he took a deep breath and decided to finish the class. With great effort and discreet help from Jennifer, he managed to fillet the fish, even if it wasn't perfect. That night, Robert barely slept. Michael's words echoed in his head. Hopeless cases. Was that really what he was? The next day, he decided to take drastic action. He went to the school before class and sought out coordinator Sarah again. "Mr. Robert, how are you?" she asked with a smile. "Mrs. Sarah, I need to talk to you about Chef Michael's behavior toward me." "Of course, have a seat. What happened?" Robert recounted in detail every episode of humiliation, from the first day until the fish lesson. Sarah listened with an increasingly serious expression. "Mr. Robert, this is unacceptable. I'll take immediate action," she said, visibly irritated. "I don't want to harm his career. I just want to be treated with the same respect as the other students." "You're absolutely right. Leave it to me." That afternoon, before class began, Sarah appeared in the kitchen accompanied by a man in a suit. "Chef Michael, this is the school's academic director, Mr. Richard. He'll be observing your class today," she said. Michael looked visibly nervous. "Oh, wonderful. Always a pleasure to have visitors," he said, forcing a smile. That day's class was completely different. Michael was polite to everyone, including Robert. He made no provocations or sarcastic remarks. When Robert struggled with preparing a hollandaise sauce, Michael even stepped in to help. "Like this, Mr. Robert. The yolk needs to be very hot but not curdled," he explained patiently. Robert was surprised by the change in behavior, but took the opportunity to learn. At the end of the class, Sarah and the director left. In the next class, Michael returned to his usual behavior. "Today we'll make a cheese soufflé," he announced. "It's a technique that requires great care and precision." Michael demonstrated, showing how to prepare the bechamel sauce, incorporate the yolks, whip the egg whites, and gently fold everything together. "The secret is not to overmix after adding the whites, or the soufflé will collapse in," he explained. Robert paid close attention. A soufflé was truly an advanced technique. When it was time for the practical, he began by preparing the bechamel sauce. He was doing well until Michael approached. "Let me see how that sauce is coming along," the chef said, taking a spoon to taste. "It's still a little thin, chef," said Robert. "I was letting it thicken more." "Thin? This is inedible," Michael exclaimed. "Look at this, it looks like dirty water." Robert didn't understand. The sauce was at a normal stage in the cooking process. "But chef, it's still cooking." "Still cooking? How long has this been on the heat?" Michael asked dramatically. "About 5 minutes. 5 minutes, and it hasn't thickened at all," Michael shouted. "This shows a complete lack of understanding of the basics." Jennifer came over to see what was happening. "Let me see, Mr. Robert," she said, examining the sauce. The sauce was normal for its cooking time. She looked at Michael in confusion. "Chef, it seems to be at the right stage for 5 minutes of cooking," she said diplomatically. Michael was annoyed by the interference. "Jennifer, you're still a student. You don't have the experience to judge this," he snapped. "But chef, no buts. Everyone focus on their own dish." Michael turned back to Robert. "Throw this sauce out and start over, and this time pay attention to what you're doing." Robert had to discard the sauce and begin again. Meanwhile, the other students were already assembling their soufflés. "Everyone, carry on. Don't wait for those who can't keep up," Michael said, clearly referring to Robert. By the time Robert finally finished the second sauce, there wasn't enough time to complete the soufflé. He only managed to mix the ingredients and put them in the oven. "Time's up," Michael shouted. Robert's soufflé had barely begun to rise when it had to be taken out of the oven. "As expected," Michael remarked, looking at Robert's sunken soufflé. "When you don't master timing, this is the result." Robert knew the issue hadn't been technical, but the time lost with the sauce that was unnecessarily thrown out. After class, several classmates approached Robert in the hallway. "Mr. Robert, what happened there was unfair," said Jason. "You didn't have enough time because of the chef," agreed Amanda. "We know you cook well. Don't pay him any mind," said Sarah, the new student. Robert was moved by his classmates' support, but felt increasingly disheartened by Michael's systematic harassment. That night, he called Emily and told her everything. "Dad, this can't go on. That man is targeting you," she said, furious. "Sweetheart, I already complained to the coordinators, but it didn't seem to help much. Then we'll have to take other measures. Dad, can you record the classes?" "Record how?" "With your phone. Leave it recording on the counter. We need proof of what he's doing." Robert hesitated. He didn't like the idea of recording secretly. "Dad, think about it. If we don't do anything, he'll keep humiliating you until you give up. That's what he wants." Emily was right. Robert decided he would record everything in the next class. The next day, he arrived at school with his phone in hand. Jennifer noticed his nervousness. "Are you okay, Mr. Robert? You seem a little off today." "I'm fine, dear, just a bit anxious about today's lesson." The theme was meat preparation. Michael explained different cuts, cooking temperatures, and methods. "Today, each of you will prepare a medium-rare steak with a red wine sauce," he announced. Robert discreetly placed his phone on the counter, camera facing the workspace, and started recording. He followed the instructions carefully. Seasoned the meat, heated the pan well, seared the steak on both sides, then lowered the heat to cook it through. Everything was going fine until Michael approached. "Let's see how this meat is doing," he said, poking the steak with a spatula. "It's not ready yet, chef. It needs about 2 more minutes," said Robert. 2 minutes? This is already overcooked," Michael exclaimed loudly enough for everyone to hear. He grabbed a knife and cut a small piece to check the inside. "Look at this. Completely raw," he said, showing the cut piece. "How do you expect to serve raw meat to anyone?" Robert looked at the cut piece. The meat was pink in the center, exactly how medium rare should be. "But chef, that's the color for medium rare," Robert tried to argue. "Medium rare? This is raw," Michael insisted. "You don't even know the difference between raw and cooked." Jennifer stepped closer and discreetly glanced at the piece of meat. "Chef, I'm sorry, but that color looks like medium rare to me," she said quietly. Michael was furious. "Jennifer, I told you not to interfere. Everyone minds their own dish." He turned back to Robert. "Throw this meat away and start over, and this time, cook it properly." Robert had to discard the steak, which was perfectly cooked, and begin again. The phone had captured the entire scene. By the end of class, Robert was emotionally drained. But now he had concrete proof of what was happening. At home, he watched the recording several times. It was clear Michael was being unfair and deliberately targeting him. He called Emily and sent her the video. "Dad, this is outrageous. That man is clearly harassing you," she said after watching. "What do you think I should do? Tomorrow we're going to the school. I'll speak to the coordinator in person." "Sweetheart, you don't have to come all this way for this." "Yes, I do, Dad. This can't continue." The next day, Emily arrived from her trip and went straight with Robert to the school. They asked to speak to Sarah urgently. "Mrs. Sarah, this is my daughter Emily. She came because the situation with Chef Michael hasn't improved," said Robert. "Hello, Emily. How can I help you?" Emily showed the video of the previous class to Sarah, who watched with an increasingly serious expression. "This is unacceptable," said Sarah, clearly outraged. "I'm calling the director right now." The director, Richard, watched the video and was visibly upset. "Mr. Robert, I apologize on behalf of the school. This is not the standard we expect from our instructors," he said. "We don't want to harm the chef's career," said Emily. "We just want my father to be treated with respect." "Of course. I'll speak with Michael today. And if there's another incident, let me know immediately." Robert and Emily left the school, hoping the situation would improve. But Michael wasn't willing to change easily. In the next class, he was even more aggressive. It was as if he knew he'd been reported again. "Today, we'll have a final practical test for the basic module," he announced. "Each student will prepare a full menu, appetizer, main course, and dessert." The students grew nervous. It was an important test. "You'll have 2 hours to prepare everything. The evaluation will consider technique, flavor, and presentation," Michael continued. Robert took a deep breath. He had studied hard and felt prepared. Michael handed out the menu: tomato bruschetta as the appetizer, grilled salmon with Sicilian lemon risotto as the main course, and vanilla panna cotta as the dessert. "You may begin." Robert mentally organized what he'd do first. He started with the panna cotta, which needed time to chill. He prepared the cream, seasoned it with vanilla, heated it to the right temperature, and poured it into molds. "Smart strategy starting with dessert," commented Jennifer, who was at the next station. While the panna cotta chilled, Robert prepped the risotto ingredients. Chopped onions, grated cheese, warmed the broth. Everything was neatly arranged. Then he moved to the bruschetta, sliced the bread, prepared the tomatoes seasoned with basil, garlic, and olive oil. Michael walked around observing each station, but avoided commenting on Robert's work. With 40 minutes left, Robert started the risotto. He sautéed the onions, added the rice, lightly toasted it, and began adding the warm broth. He stayed focused, stirring constantly and adding broth just right. The risotto was becoming creamy and perfect. 30 minutes, Michael announced. Robert seasoned and finished the risotto with parmesan and lemon zest. It was perfect. He moved to the salmon, seasoned it with salt, pepper, and herbs, then placed it on the hot grill. The fish seared beautifully, leaving grill marks. Robert timed it perfectly to avoid overcooking. 15 minutes, time to finish up. Robert toasted the bruschetta, topped it with the seasoned tomatoes, checked the salmon, which was just right, and unmolded the panna cottas, now firm and smooth. Time's up. Robert looked at his dishes and felt proud. Everything was well presented and smelled delicious. Michael began evaluating each student's dishes. He praised some, critiqued others, always in a technical and constructive way, until he reached Robert's station. Michael looked at the dishes with a neutral expression. He cut into the salmon to check the inside. It was pink and juicy. Perfect. He tasted the risotto, creamy, well seasoned, with balanced citrus flavor. He tried the bruschetta. The tomatoes were fresh and flavorful, the bread just right. Finally, he sampled the panna cotta, smooth, creamy, with just the right vanilla flavor. It was clear all the dishes were technically correct and delicious. Michael stayed silent for several seconds, clearly searching for something to criticize. Well, he finally began, the salmon is acceptable. The risotto is a bit under-seasoned, the bruschetta is okay, and the panna cotta is a little soft. Robert couldn't believe what he was hearing. You knew all the dishes were perfect. Jennifer, who was standing nearby, asked, "Chef, can I taste them too?" to learn how to evaluate. Michael hesitated, but couldn't refuse. "Go ahead." Jennifer carefully sampled each dish. "Chef, I found everything very flavorful. The risotto is well seasoned, and the panna cotta has the perfect consistency," she said diplomatically. Other students also asked to taste, and they all agreed the dishes were excellent. Michael was visibly irritated by the situation. "Well, everyone has their own opinion," he said, forcing the words. "Mr. Roberts' grade will be 6.0. It was an unfairly low score for dishes that were clearly superior. Jason couldn't hold back. "Chef, with all due respect, I don't think this grade reflects the quality of the dishes." "And who asked for your opinion?" Michael snapped back, agitated. "No one, but it's obvious that—" "Nothing's obvious, I'm the one who evaluates here," Michael shouted, losing his composure. The atmosphere grew tense. All the students were clearly uncomfortable with the situation. Robert decided he wouldn't stay silent any longer. "Chef Michael, I'd like to understand the technical criteria you're using for this evaluation," he said, his voice firm but respectful. Michael was taken aback by Robert's assertiveness. "What do you mean, technical criteria? You said the risotto was under-seasoned, but everyone who tasted it found it well-balanced. The panna cotta had the right consistency. I'd like to know where the technical mistakes are," Robert insisted. Michael turned red with anger. He couldn't give a technical explanation because there were no mistakes. "Listen, Mr. Robert, I'm a certified chef with 15 years of experience. I don't owe anyone an explanation for my criteria," he said, completely dropping any pretense of politeness. "Of course you do," Jennifer interjected bravely. "We're paying students, and we deserve fair evaluations." "Fair? You want fairness?" Michael laughed sarcastically. "Fairness would be this man here admitting he's too old and incapable to be here." The silence that followed was awkward. Michael had crossed a line. "You know what, Chef?" Robert said, standing up. "You're right about one thing. There is one thing I'm truly incapable of." Michael smirked, thinking he'd broken Robert. "And what's that?" "I'm incapable of being as petty and small-minded as you," Robert replied with dignity. The response caught Michael off guard. He hadn't expected Robert to fight back. "Excuse me," he stammered. "You heard me. I came here to learn cooking, not to cater to anyone's inferiority complex," Robert continued, gaining confidence. Inferiority complex? What are you talking about? I'm talking about a professional who feels threatened by a 65-year-old student who just wants to learn, Robert said calmly. Michael was speechless. He'd never been confronted like this. You can't talk to me like that, he sputtered. I can. And you know why? Because respect is earned, not demanded, Robert replied. The entire class watched in silence, impressed by Robert's courage. And one more thing, Chef, Robert continued. I may be 65, I may have started late, I may not have perfect technique, but I have something you clearly lack. And what's that? Michael asked, still in shock. The humility to learn and the generosity to teach, Robert answered. My late wife always said true wisdom lies in recognizing we always have something to learn and something to teach. Robert's eyes welled up as he spoke of Margaret, but his voice remained steady. You may have all the diplomas in the world, but as long as you use your knowledge to belittle instead of uplift, you'll never be a true master. Michael was completely taken aback. He didn't know how to respond. Robert picked up his utensils and began putting them away. I'm going to finish this course, Chef, not because you allowed it, but because I promised my wife. And when I finish, I'll know I achieved something you never could. And what would that be? Asked Michael, still stunned. Keeping my dignity even in the face of pettiness, Robert replied, walking out of the kitchen with his head held high. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, back to the story. The other students stayed silent for a few moments until Jennifer started clapping. Soon after, Jason joined in, then Sarah, then Amanda. Within seconds, the whole class was applauding. Michael stood frozen in the middle of the kitchen, watching his students cheer for someone who had just publicly confronted him. Enough, stop this, he shouted, but the applause continued. When it finally died down, Jennifer addressed Michael. Chef, with all due respect, what you did to Mr. Robert was unacceptable. He's the best student in this class. The best student? He can't even hold a knife properly, Michael shot back. Yes, he can, and he cooks better than a lot of people I know, said Jason. You're all out of your minds, that old man. Watch your words, Chef, Sarah interrupted. Mr. Robert deserves respect. Michael realized he had completely lost control of the situation. His own students were rebelling against him. You know what? Do whatever you want. I'm still in charge here, he said, storming out of the kitchen in a huff. In the hallway, Michael ran into Coordinator Sarah and Director Richard, who had heard the entire argument. Michael, we need to talk, said Richard sternly. Look, I can explain. No need to explain. It was all very clear, Sarah said coldly. You were listening. We were passing by when we heard the shouting, Richard explained, and honestly, I'm ashamed of what I witnessed. Michael tried to justify himself. That student was disrespecting me. Disrespecting, Sarah cut in. He was defending himself against abusive and prejudiced treatment. Prejudiced? I was just being technical. Michael, we see everything that happens here, and what we saw was age discrimination, plain and simple, Richard stated firmly. That's not true. So you're saying our perception is wrong, and all the students too? Sarah asked. Michael realized he was in an impossible situation. Well, maybe I was a little too demanding, he admitted reluctantly. A little demanding? Michael, you systematically humiliated a student for 2 months, said Richard. That's not demanding, it's harassment. Harassment? Don't exaggerate. We're not exaggerating, Sarah said. We have video proof of everything. Michael turned pale. He didn't know he'd been recorded. What video? The student himself recorded some classes to protect himself, Richard explained, and what we saw was absolutely unacceptable. Michael didn't know what to say. Look, maybe I can talk to him, apologize. Oh, you will apologize, said Sarah. But that's not all. You'll completely rethink your approach as an educator. And if that doesn't happen, we'll have to consider other measures, Richard added. Michael understood the implied threat. His job was on the line. Meanwhile, Robert had left the school and was sitting on a nearby bench, trying to process everything that had happened. He'd never confronted anyone like that in his life. His phone rang. It was Emily. "Dad, how was the test today?" "Sweetheart, something happened." He told her everything. "Dad, I'm so proud of you. Finally put that guy in his place. Did I do the right thing, dear? I've never been one to fight with anyone." "Dad, you didn't fight. You defended yourself, and with such dignity that Mom would have been proud." Robert smiled, thinking of Margaret. "She'd say I took too long to react," he laughed. "True. Mom wouldn't have let it slide even the first time." Robert went home lost in thought. He wasn't sure if he should continue the course or look for another school. The next morning, the phone rang. It was Sarah, the coordinator. "Mr. Robert, could you come to the school today? We need to talk." "Of course, Mrs. Sarah. Did something happen?" "We'd rather discuss it in person." Robert grew worried. Maybe they were going to expel him for confronting Michael. When he arrived at the school, he went straight to the coordinator's office. Sarah was there with the principal, Richard. "Have a seat, Mr. Robert," Sarah said with a smile. "First of all, we want to apologize for what you went through." Robert was surprised. "Apologize for what?" "For the inappropriate treatment you received from Chef Michael," Richard explained. "We've spoken with him and made it clear that such behavior is unacceptable." "You didn't have to—" "Yes, we did," Sarah interrupted. "You're an excellent student and didn't deserve that." "Excellent student? But Chef Michael said—" "Chef Michael was wrong," Richard stated firmly. "We spoke with other instructors who've observed your classes, and they all praised your performance." Robert couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Actually, we have a proposal for you," Sarah said. "What proposal?" "We'd like to transfer you to another class with a different instructor, a chef who truly knows how to teach," Richard explained. "And if you'd like, you can retake some lessons to reinforce your learning," Sarah added. Robert was moved. "You'd do that for me?" "Of course. You have every right to quality instruction," Richard said. "And Chef Michael?" "He'll undergo additional training in teaching methods," Sarah explained. "If there's another incident like this, he'll be dismissed." Robert accepted the offer. The following week, he joined a new class with a chef named Stephen, a calm and methodical man in his mid-40s. "Everyone, this is Robert, who's joining our class," Chef Stephen introduced. "Robert, would you like to tell us a bit about yourself?" "Hello, everyone. I'm 65, retired, and I'm here to fulfill my late wife's dream," Robert said simply. "How lovely." "What was her dream?" asked a young student named Lauren. "She always wanted to see me cook. Said I had a knack for everything except the kitchen," Robert chuckled. "Then let's prove her right about your knack," Chef Stephen said with a smile. The difference in atmosphere was striking. Chef Stephen was patient, explaining as many times as needed, and treated every student with respect. "Robert, I'll pair you with Lauren. She can help you with any initial questions," the chef said. Lauren, a 22-year-old nutrition student, had taken to Robert from the start. "Mr. Robert, it's so nice having someone with your experience here," she said. "I bet you have plenty of stories to share." Robert felt welcomed. This was exactly the environment he'd hoped for when he signed up. During the first practical lesson in the new class, the theme was risotto. Robert smiled, remembering his past attempts with the dish. "Has anyone here made risotto before?" Chef Stephen asked. Robert raised his hand. "I've tried it a few times, Chef." "Great. Then you can help any classmates who struggle." It was the first time an instructor had suggested he assist others. Robert felt valued. During the class, he helped Lauren with the rice texture and another young student, David, with the broth seasoning. "Wow, Mr. Robert, you teach better than my mom," David joked. "Oh, come on, son. I'm just sharing what little I've learned." Chef Stephen watched from afar and approached. "Robert, you have a natural gift for teaching. Have you ever thought about giving classes?" "Me, teach? Oh, come on, Chef. I'm still learning." "Exactly. Those who are learning understand the struggles of beginners better." The idea stuck with Robert. He'd never considered it before. In the following weeks, Robert flourished in the new class. His dishes improved with each lesson, and he grew more confident. One day, Chef Stephen made a suggestion. "Everyone, let's do something different today. Each of you will teach a dish to the rest of the class. It can be a family recipe, something from childhood, anything with special meaning." The students were excited. Lauren chose her grandmother's chocolate cake. David picked his mum's shepherd's pie. "And you, Robert, what will you teach us?" asked Chef Stephen. Robert thought for a moment. "I'll teach the bean and noodle soup my wife used to make. It was her favorite dish," he said, emotional. "Perfect, that'll be beautiful." At the next class, Robert brought all the ingredients for Margaret's soup. He was nervous, but determined. "Everyone, pay attention to Mr. Robert," said Chef Stephen. "He's going to teach a very special recipe." Robert began by explaining the dish's story. "My wife Margaret made this soup whenever someone in the family was sick or sad. She said it was like a hug in food form." The students listened intently, moved by the emotion in Robert's voice. "The secret is in the time and care. You can't rush it," he continued, starting to sauté the seasonings. Robert demonstrated each step calmly and patiently, explaining every detail that made a difference. How to chop the vegetables, when to add each ingredient, how to adjust the seasoning. "Oh, everyone, just smell this," he said as the soup neared completion. "This is the scent of my home with Margaret." When the soup was ready, Robert served it for everyone to taste. The silence that followed was different from what he'd experienced with Michael. It was a silence of appreciation. "My goodness, Mr. Robert," Lauren exclaimed, her eyes glistening. "This really is a hug in food form." "It's true. There's something special in this soup," David agreed. Chef Stephen tasted it and was impressed. "Robert, this isn't just cooking, it's art, it's love, it's history," he said. "Congratulations." Robert was moved by the sincere praise. It was the first time he truly felt recognized as a cook. "Thank you, everyone. Margaret would be happy to know you liked her recipe." After class, Chef Stephen pulled Robert aside for a private talk. "Robert, can I ask you a personal question?" "Of course, Chef." "What motivates you to keep learning at your age?" "It's not a prejudiced question, just genuine curiosity." Robert thought before answering. "You know, Chef, when Margaret passed, I felt completely lost. For 40 years, she handled everything in the kitchen. I barely knew how to fry an egg." "I understand." "The first few months, I survived on takeout and neighbors' help. But one day I found a little notebook where she'd written down our family's favorite recipes." Robert continued, emotional. "And that's when you decided to learn?" "Not right away. First, I tried making a few recipes alone. It was a disaster." Robert laughed. "But you know what happened?" "What?" "With every attempt, no matter how bad the result, I felt closer to her. Like I was talking to Margaret through the food," he explained. Chef Stephen was touched by the answer. "And when did you decide to take the course?" "When I realized I wanted to do it right. I wanted to honor her memory by preparing dishes the way she did, and maybe learn new things she would have loved to try," said Robert. "Robert, can I tell you something?" "Of course." "In 15 years of teaching cooking, I've never had a student with a motivation as beautiful as yours," said Chef Stephen. "Most come here for a career or a hobby, but you came out of love." Robert was moved by the chef's words. "That's why you cook with such tenderness. That's why your soup tasted like home, like affection. Because you cook with your heart," Stephen continued. "Thank you, Chef, you're being very kind." "I'm not being kind, I'm being honest, and I have a proposal for you." "What proposal?" "How about teaching some classes here at the school? Classes about emotional cooking, about family meals," Stephen suggested. Robert was surprised. "Me? Teach? But Chef, I'm still a student." "Exactly. You have something many professional chefs have lost along the way. An emotional connection to food," Stephen explained. "But I don't have teaching experience." "Robert, you taught that recipe today in a way that touched all the students. That's not something you learn in a teaching course. It comes from within." The proposal deeply affected Robert. He'd never imagined he could teach anyone anything. "Can I think about it?" "Of course, no rush." That night, Robert spoke to Margaret's photo in the living room. "Margaret, my love, something unexpected happened today. The chef wants me to teach cooking classes," he said, smiling. "Remember that time you said I had a knack for teaching? It was when I was helping David, our neighbor, with his math homework." Robert remembered it perfectly. Margaret always said he had the patience and skill to explain things well. "Do you think I should accept?" he asked the photo. At that moment, a breeze came through the window and rustled the curtains. Robert smiled, feeling as if it were Margaret's answer. I think you're saying yes, aren't you? He laughed. The next day, he sought out Chef Stephen and accepted the offer. That's wonderful, Robert. Let's start slow. How about one class a week on family recipes? Stephen suggested. Sounds good. But what if the students don't like it? They will, I'm sure. In fact, I already talked to Lauren and David, and they were thrilled. Robert's first class as a teaching assistant was about stroganoff. He shared that it was the dish Margaret made for special occasions. The secret to Margaret's stroganoff was making the sauce very slowly, with patience, he explained while sautéing the onions. Mr. Robert, how do you know the right time to add the cream? Asked a new student named Olivia. Good question, dear. Margaret taught me a trick, Robert said, smiling. When the meat is tender and the sauce is slightly thick, that's the time. But how do you know if it's tender? Come here, test it with a fork. If the meat shreds easily, it's ready. Olivia tested it and confirmed it was perfect. It's true. How did you learn that? 40 years watching the best cook I've ever known, Robert replied, emotional. The class was a success. The students loved both his teaching style and the stroganoff. Mr. Robert, you teach in a way that really makes sense to us, David commented. It's true, you explain with such care, Lauren agreed. Chef Stephen watched from a distance and was impressed. Robert truly had a natural gift for teaching. In the following weeks, Robert's classes became the most popular at the school. He taught everything from simple dishes like baked rice to more elaborate recipes like chicken pot pie. Everyone, today we'll learn how to make homemade bread, Robert announced one Thursday. Homemade bread? That's hard, Olivia exclaimed. It's not hard, sweetheart. It's labor-intensive, which is different, explained Robert. Margaret used to say bread needs 3 things: good ingredients, the right timing, and a loving hand. Robert taught them everything from how to activate the yeast to kneading the dough just right. Hey everyone, pay attention. The dough is ready when it's smooth and elastic like this, he demonstrated, stretching a piece until it formed a thin film. Wow, how do you know that? Asked David. Margaret showed me once. She called it the window pane test, Robert explained. If you can stretch the dough until it's translucent without tearing, it's ready. When the bread came out of the oven, the whole school smelled it. Other teachers and students showed up in the kitchen to find the source of that wonderful aroma. Robert, what's that amazing smell? Asked Mrs. Sarah, the coordinator, appearing at the door. It's the homemade bread we learned to make today, Mrs. Sarah, replied Lauren proudly. Sarah took a bite while it was still warm and her eyes lit up. Oh my, it's been so long since I've had bread like this. It reminds me of my grandmother's house, she said, moved. That's exactly what Margaret used to say, Robert remarked. That good food awakens fond memories. The story of Robert's success as a teacher reached the ears of Principal Richard. Robert, I've heard your classes are a big hit, he said, meeting Robert in the hallway. I'm glad to hear that, Mr. Richard. I've really been enjoying teaching. I have a proposal for you. How about making this partnership official? You could be our official assistant teacher. Robert was surprised. Official assistant teacher, what do you mean? With a salary, benefits, everything proper, what do you think? Richard explained. But, Mr. Richard, I haven't even finished my course yet. And you don't need to. You have something more valuable than any diploma. Life experience and a love for cooking, Richard said. Robert was speechless. He never imagined that at 65 he'd start a new career. Can I talk to my daughter and give you an answer later? Of course, no rush. That night Robert called Emily, thrilled. Sweetheart, you won't believe what happened today. Tell me, Dad. Robert shared the proposal, and Emily was moved. Dad, that's wonderful. Mum would be so proud. Do you think I should accept? Of course, you found your calling. A calling at 65. Who would have thought, huh? Dad, there's no age limit for discovering our talents. What matters is having the courage to embrace opportunities. Emily was right. The next day, Robert approached Richard and accepted the offer. Great. Welcome to the school's official team, the principal said, shaking his hand. The news that Robert had become a teacher spread quickly among the students. Everyone was happy, especially his original class. Mr. Robert is a teacher now. How proud, said Jennifer, who had always been his biggest supporter. And well deserved, Jason agreed. Even some students from Michael's class came to congratulate him. "Mr. Robert, we heard the news. Congratulations," said Sarah, the student who always defended him. "Thank you, sweetheart. Who would have thought all those humiliations would lead to this, huh? You turned stones into flowers," she said poetically. Robert was touched by her words. Robert's first official class as a teacher was about food that heals the soul. He decided to teach a special vegetable soup that Margaret used to make when he was sick. "Everyone, today we're learning something very special," he began, nervous but determined. "We're learning that cooking is so much more than technique. It's affection, it's care, it's love made tangible." The class included new students and some veterans who had asked to attend. "This recipe I'm about to teach isn't in any book. It's right here," he said, pointing to his heart. Robert told the story of the soup as he prepared it. "Every time I caught a cold, Margaret would make this soup. She said each ingredient had a purpose. Carrots to bring sweetness to life, celery for structure, potatoes for substance." The students listened, fascinated, drawn in by both the recipe and the story. "And the final secret," Robert said, stirring the soup lovingly, "is to put love into every stir. It might sound silly, but it makes a difference." "How so, Professor?" asked a new student. "When you cook while thinking fondly of the person who'll eat it, the food changes. I can't explain it scientifically, but it's true," Robert replied. The soup was ready, and its aroma filled the kitchen. When the students tasted it, many were moved. "Professor, this really tastes like love," said a young man, nearly in tears. "It reminds me of childhood," another student agreed. Robert smiled, knowing he'd conveyed exactly what he intended. At the end of class, a student approached him. "Professor Robert, may I ask you something personal?" "Of course, dear." "How do you talk about your wife without getting sad?" Robert thought for a moment before answering. "You know, at first it was very hard. I'd cry just stepping into the kitchen," he admitted honestly. "What changed?" "I realized that talking about her, teaching her recipes, is a way to keep her alive. Every time you make one of these dishes, Margaret is present in some way." His answer moved not just the student, but everyone listening. "Is that why cooking became so special to you?" another student asked. "Exactly. It became a bridge between what was and what still can be," Robert replied philosophically. Robert's classes quickly gained fame in town. People who weren't even students came to hear his talks on effective cooking. One day, a journalist from the local paper visited the school wanting to write a story about him. "Professor Robert, I heard your story and would love to interview you," she said. "A story about me, but I'm no one famous," he replied modestly. "That's exactly why. Your story inspires ordinary people like us." The article ran on the front page of the lifestyle section with the headline, "At 65, retiree becomes chef and teacher to honor his wife's memory." The response was overwhelming. Robert began receiving invitations to speak at other cooking schools in the area. "Dad, you've become a celebrity," teased Emily, who had come to visit after the article. "Not a celebrity, dear. Just a man trying to do the right thing. And doing it very well. Mom would be so proud." A month after the article, Robert got an unexpected call. "Professor Robert, this is Mary from the State Culinary Foundation. Our director would like to speak with you." Robert was puzzled. Who was this director? On the scheduled day, he went to the address given, an elegant building downtown. He was greeted by a poised woman in her 50s. "Professor Robert, I'm Catherine Williams, director of the foundation. It's a pleasure to meet you," she said, shaking his hand. "The pleasure is mine, Mrs. Catherine, but I must admit I'm curious about this meeting." "We read the article about you and were very interested in your work," Catherine explained. "We have a project and would like to invite you to participate." "What kind of project?" "We want to create a cooking program for seniors, and we believe you'd be the perfect person to lead it." Robert was surprised. "Lead it? But Mrs. Catherine, I've barely finished my own course." "Professor, what you have can't be taught in a course. Sensitivity, life experience, and the ability to connect cooking with affection," Catherine said. "But I don't have administrative experience." We'd have a team to help you with the administrative side. You'd be responsible for the pedagogical and inspirational aspects. The offer was tempting, but Robert was worried about the responsibility. Can I think about it? Of course. Take all the time you need. At home, Robert talked at length to Margaret's photo. Margaret, my love, things are moving so fast. Am I on the right path? He remembered a conversation they'd had years ago when Margaret suggested he retire and do volunteer work. Robert, you have so much to offer. You could help others with your experience, she had said. Maybe this project was exactly what Margaret had in mind. He decided to accept the offer. The program, Cooking Memories, launched 3 months later. The first class had 20 students, all over 60. Everyone, welcome to our program, Robert said in the first lesson. Here, we'll learn that it's never too late to discover new talents. Among the students was Mrs. Rose, 72 years old and widowed for 5 years. Professor, I came because I don't even know how to fry an egg. My husband never let me cook, she said timidly. Mrs. Rose, there's no right or wrong here, only the willingness to learn, Robert replied warmly. There was also Mr. David, 68, retired and alone. Professor, my children live far away and I survive on ready-made meals. I wanted to learn to cook something nice for myself, he explained. Perfect, Mr. David. Cooking for yourself is an act of self-love, Robert said. The classes had a different dynamic from traditional school, more conversational, more heartfelt. Today we'll learn to make rice pudding, Robert announced. Does anyone here have a special memory tied to rice pudding? Mrs. Rose raised her hand. My mother used to make it for the June festivals. It was the best in the world. Then today we'll make rice pudding that brings back those memories, Robert said with a smile. As they cooked, Robert didn't just teach techniques. He talked about life, memories, and overcoming challenges. Look, everyone, cooking is like life. You need patience, care, and you can't be afraid to make mistakes, he mused, stirring the rice pudding. Professor, you talk like a poet, Mr. David teased. Margaret always said I was a bit of a poet, Robert laughed. I think she was right. The program was an absolute success. Within 6 months, there was a waiting list. Mrs. Rose, who couldn't fry an egg when she started, was now making elaborate pies. Professor, I never imagined I could do this, she said, showing off a perfect apple pie. Mrs. Rose, you always could. You just needed someone to believe in you. Mr. David had completely transformed. Not only had he learned to cook, but he also started inviting neighbors over for lunch. Professor, my house feels alive again. Every Sunday I host friends for lunch, he shared happily. How wonderful, Mr. David. The kitchen really is the heart of the home. One day, Robert got an unexpected call from coordinator Sarah. Robert, I have news for you, she said, her voice odd. What news? Michael resigned. Robert was surprised. Resigned? Why? He said he's rethinking his career, that he wants to do something more meaningful, Sarah explained. I see. But before leaving, he left a message for you. A message? He said, tell Robert he was right. He taught me that being a chef is more than just technique. Robert was moved by the message. Where did he go? He opened a small diner on the outskirts, said he wants to cook for ordinary people, with love, Sarah shared. Robert smiled. Maybe his confrontation with Michael had planted a seed after all. 2 years later, the Cooking Memories program had become a national reference. Robert received invitations from all over the country to replicate the project. Dad, you've become a role model in education for seniors, said Emily, visiting him one weekend. Who would have thought, sweetheart? At 65, I discovered my life's purpose. Mom knew. She always said you had a special gift for connecting with people. At that moment, the phone rang. It was Catherine from the foundation. Robert, I have an amazing proposal for you, she said excitedly. What proposal? We've been invited to present our project at an international conference on senior education. International? Where? Right here in the US, but educators from all over the world will attend. Robert grew nervous. He had never spoken to such a large and important audience before. Catherine, I don't know if I'm ready for this. Robert, you're more than ready. Your experience could inspire educators worldwide. But I don't speak English well. You don't need to. There will be translators. What matters is your message. After much insistence, Robert agreed to participate in the conference. The day of the presentation arrived. The auditorium was packed with educators from different countries. Robert was visibly nervous. "Good afternoon," he began, his voice trembling. "My name is Robert Johnson. I'm 67 years old, and 3 years ago, I learned it's never too late to start over." The audience listened in respectful silence. "I don't have an academic degree in education. My only credential is having learned that teaching is, above all, an act of love." Robert told his story: the loss of Margaret, the humiliations with Michael, the discovery of his calling to teach. "I've learned that when we teach from the heart, we don't just share knowledge. We transform lives," he said, gaining confidence. The audience was visibly moved. Cooking was just the means. The goal was always to restore dignity and purpose to people society considers disposable, Robert continued, because there's no age limit for dreaming, learning, or starting over. There's only the will to do it. When he finished, the auditorium erupted in applause. Many educators were in tears. An American teacher approached him afterward. "Mr. Johnson, your presentation was the most touching I've ever heard. May I bring your methodology to the US?" "Of course, ma'am. Knowledge is meant to be shared." A German educator also expressed interest. "Professor, I'd like to invite you to give lectures in Germany." Robert was surprised by the international attention, but politely declined the travel invitations. His work was here with his people. Returning home, Robert felt fulfilled. He had honored Margaret's memory in a way he never imagined. That night, he sat in his armchair, where he always talked to Margaret's photo. "Margaret, my love, I think I've finally made your dream of seeing me cook come true. And more than that, I've found my purpose." He glanced at the framed diploma on the wall. Professor Robert Johnson Smith, specialist in culinary education for seniors. Who would have thought that lost man who barely knew how to fry an egg would become a professor, huh? A gentle breeze drifted through the window, rustling the curtains. Robert smiled, feeling Margaret's loving presence. "I know you're proud, my love, and I promise to keep doing this work as long as God gives me strength." The next day, Robert received an unexpected call. "Professor Robert, it's Michael." Robert was stunned. He hadn't spoken to Michael in 2 years. "Michael, how are you?" "I'm good, Professor. Actually, I'm great. I called to thank you." "Thank me for what?" "For teaching me the most important lesson of my professional life," Michael said, emotional. "What lesson?" "That being a chef isn't about ego or superiority. It's about nourishing people, about creating affection through food." Robert was moved. "I'm happy to hear that, Michael. Professor, can I tell you something? My diner is doing really well. Do you know why?" "Why?" "Because now I cook the way you taught me, with love. My customers can feel the difference." "That's wonderful, Michael. That makes me very happy." "Professor, can I ask you a favor?" "Of course." "I'd like you to visit my diner to see how your lessons changed my life." Robert accepted the invitation. The following Saturday, he went to see Michael's diner. It was a simple but welcoming place. The walls had quotes about the love of cooking. Michael had completely changed. "Professor, what a joy to have you here," said Michael, visibly emotional. "Michael, what a lovely place, and what a wonderful smell. Today's special is stroganoff. I learned to make it with love, just like you teach." Robert tasted the stroganoff and was impressed. It truly tasted like care. "Michael, it's delicious. Congratulations." "Thank you, Professor. Now I understand what you meant in that lesson about cooking with the heart." Michael introduced Robert to his customers, sharing how he had transformed his view of cooking. "This is Professor Robert, the man who taught me that cooking is an act of love," he said proudly. The customers were delighted to meet Robert, who chatted with each one, interested in their stories. "Professor," said an elderly lady, "Michael always talks about you, says you changed his life." "Actually, Mrs. Mary, we helped each other. He taught me not to give up on my dreams." At the end of the visit, Michael asked to speak privately with Robert. "Professor, I have a dream." "What dream?" I want to open a culinary school, but following the model you created, focused on affection, on humanization. What a wonderful idea. And I'd like you to be my partner." Robert was surprised by the offer. "Partner?" "Yes. You'd bring the teaching expertise, and I'd handle the technical side. Together, we could train more humane chefs." The proposal was interesting, but Robert had commitments with the Cooking Memories program. "Michael, I'm honored by the invitation, but I can't leave my current work." "You don't have to leave. It could be a side project on weekends." Robert considered the proposal. It would be a way to expand his mission of humanizing culinary education. "You know what? Let's give it a try." And so the Academy of Effective Cooking was born, a partnership between the experienced Professor Robert and the renewed Chef Michael. The Academy had a unique approach, training chefs who were technically skilled, but above all, humane and sensitive. "Everyone," Robert said in the first class, "here you'll learn that true culinary excellence lies in the ability to move those who eat your food. And that only happens when we cook with love, with respect for the ingredients, and for those who will enjoy it," Michael added. The partnership was so successful that within a year, they had a waiting list. Students came from other cities to study at the academy. One day, a special student arrived, Jason, the young man who had defended Robert during the humiliations with Michael. "Professor Robert, what a joy to see you," said Jason, hugging him. "Jason, my dear student, how are you?" "I'm great. I finished the basic course and now I want to specialize. I heard about the academy and came right away. It's so good to have you here, Jason. It'll be a pleasure to teach you again." During the course, Jason stood out not just for his technique, but for his culinary sensitivity. "Jason," Robert said after a lesson on handmade pasta, "you have a gift. Not just for cooking, but for teaching." "Teaching? Me?" "Yes. I've noticed how you help your classmates, how patiently you explain. Have you ever thought about being a teacher? I've never considered it. Think about it. The world needs more educators like you." The suggestion planted a seed in Jason, who began considering a teaching career. Meanwhile, the Cooking Memories program continued to grow. There were already classes in 5 cities in the region. Mrs. Rose, that lady who arrived not knowing how to fry an egg, had become one of the program's volunteer assistants. "Professor," she said one afternoon, "I wanted to thank you for changing my life." "How so, Mrs. Rose?" "Before coming here, I felt useless, discarded. Now I know I still have so much to offer." "You always did, Mrs. Rose. You just needed an opportunity to discover it. That's why I now help others like me, so they too can realize it's never too late to start over." Stories like Mrs. Rose's were common in the program. People who arrived discouraged and left renewed. Mr. David, the man who used to live on ready-made meals, had become the neighborhood chef. Every weekend, his home turned into a small, informal restaurant. "Professor," he proudly shared, "now the neighbors line up to eat my lasagna." Who would have thought? "Mr. David, you discovered a hidden talent." "I discovered more than that, Professor. I found out I can still be useful, that I can still make a difference in people's lives." These transformations deeply moved Robert. Every changed life confirmed he was on the right path. 3 years after starting the program, Robert received a phone call that touched him deeply. "Professor Robert, this is Lauren. Remember me?" "Lauren? Of course I remember. My dear student from school, how are you?" "I'm great, Professor. Actually, I'm calling with some news." "What news?" "I opened my own culinary school. And you know what makes it special?" "What?" "I follow your teaching methodology, cooking with affection, technique with humanity." Robert was moved. "Lauren, how proud I am. Where is your school?" "Here in Nashville. I already have 50 students, and they all learn that cooking is an act of love." "Wonderful, I'm so happy to hear that. Professor, can I ask you a favor?" "Of course, my dear. I'd love for you to come here and give a talk to my students. It would be an honor to have you." Robert eagerly accepted. 2 weeks later, he was in Nashville at Lauren's school. "Everyone," Lauren introduced him, "this is Professor Robert, the man who revolutionized my view on culinary education." The students listened attentively, as Robert shared his story and spoke about the importance of affection in cooking. Technique can be learned from books, he said, but love's seasoning can only be learned by living, feeling, loving. At the end of the talk, a young student approached him. "Professor, your story inspired me so much. Can I ask you a question?" "Of course, my dear." "How did you know you were on the right path?" Robert thought for a moment before answering. "You know, my dear, when you're doing something that connects with your essence, you just feel it. Every day becomes a gift, not an obligation." "And when did you feel that?" "The first time I saw a student moved by a simple recipe. That's when I realized I wasn't just teaching cooking. I was helping recover memories, create bonds, and humanize relationships." The answer deeply touched the young woman. "Thank you, Professor. Now I understand better what I want to do with my life." Back in his city, Robert felt more fulfilled than ever. At 69, he had found not just a profession, but a mission. One day, he received a call from Emily. "Dad, I have a surprise for you." "What surprise?" "I'm coming over for the weekend, and I'm bringing someone special." "Someone special?" "My boyfriend, Stephen. I want you to meet him." Robert was happy. Emily had been single for many years. "That's wonderful, my dear. I can't wait to meet him." On Saturday, Emily arrived accompanied by a friendly man around 45 years old. "Dad, this is Stephen. Stephen, my father, Robert." "Pleasure to meet you, Mr. Robert." "Emily talks about you a lot," said Stephen, shaking his hand. "The pleasure is mine, Stephen. Welcome." During lunch, Stephen shared that he was a widower and had 2 teenage daughters. "Mr. Robert, Emily told me your story. It's very inspiring," he said. "Thank you, Stephen. And what do you do for work?" "I'm a psychologist, and I'm impressed by the work you do. It's therapy through cooking." "I never thought of it that way, but maybe you're right." "I'm sure of it. Cooking is a therapeutic act, especially the way you teach it." The conversation was very pleasant. Robert liked Stephen a lot and saw that Emily was happy. "Dad," Emily said privately, "what did you think of Stephen?" "I liked him very much, sweetheart. He seems like a good man." "He is, Dad. And you know what? He reminds me of you." "How so?" "The way he treats people with kindness, his patience, his wisdom. I think Mom would approve." Robert smiled. Margaret had always wanted to see Emily happy again. "If he makes you happy, sweetheart, he has my approval." 6 months later, Emily called excitedly. "Dad, Stephen proposed." "That's wonderful, sweetheart. I'm so happy for you." "Dad, I wanted to ask you in person. Can you come to the wedding?" "Of course I can. I wouldn't miss it for the world." "And Dad, I'd like you to cater the wedding dinner." Robert was moved. "Me? But sweetheart, that's a big responsibility." "Dad, I want our celebration to have the seasoning of love you've learned to put into food." "All right, sweetheart. It would be an honor." The wedding was set for 6 months later. Robert began planning a special menu, thinking of each dish as a declaration of love. He decided on a buffet with recipes that told their family's story: Margaret's bean and pasta soup, the stroganoff for special occasions, the homemade Sunday bread. "Every dish will have a story, a memory," he told Mrs. Betty, who had offered to help. "How beautiful, Robert. Margaret would be proud." "You know, Betty, I think she'll be there in some way. Present in every recipe she taught me, in every seasoning I learned to use." The wedding day arrived. Robert had prepared everything with great care, with help from some of his program's students who volunteered. "Professor, it's an honor to help with your daughter's wedding," said Mrs. Rose, who was preparing the bread. "Thank you, Mrs. Rose. You're all my second family." The ceremony was beautiful. Robert cried seeing Emily at the altar, remembering how happy Margaret would have been. During dinner, the guests praised the food. "Robert," Stephen's mother said, "this food has a special taste. It's truly love." "Thank you, Mary. That's exactly what I wanted. Food that tastes like love." At the end of the celebration, Emily approached Robert. "Dad, thank you for making our day perfect." "I'm glad you liked it, sweetheart." "Dad, can I tell you something?" "Of course. I'm sure Mom was here today. I felt her presence in every dish, in every flavor." Robert was moved. I felt it too, sweetheart. She was present in every recipe, in every seasoning. A year after the wedding, Emily shared news that touched Robert deeply. Dad, you're going to be a grandfather. A grandfather? Really? Really? I'm 3 months pregnant. Robert was overjoyed. At 70, he would be a grandfather. What happiness, sweetheart. Margaret would be thrilled. Dad, we've already chosen the baby's name. What is it? If it's a girl, she'll be named Margaret, in honor of Grandma. Robert cried with emotion. Emily, you don't know how much joy you're giving me. And if it's a boy, he'll be named Robert, in honor of Grandpa. During Emily's pregnancy, Robert felt both excited and worried. He was eager to meet his grandchild, but feared he wouldn't have the energy to be a good grandfather at his age. Dad, you're going to be a wonderful grandfather, Emily reassured him. Look at everything you've managed to teach so many people. It's different, sweetheart. Raising a child is another responsibility. Dad, you'll teach our child the same things you taught me. Love, respect, perseverance. The baby was born on a spring morning. It was a girl. Robert was in the waiting room when Stephen came out with the news. Mr. Robert, little Maggie is here. Both are doing well, Robert cried with emotion. When he saw his granddaughter for the first time, he was deeply moved. Hi, Maggie, he said, cradling her in his arms. I'm your Grandpa Robert. The baby opened her little eyes and seemed to smile. Look, she already recognizes you, said Emily, touched. She has her great-grandmother Margaret's eyes, Robert observed. In the following months, Robert divided his time between work and his granddaughter. He loved spending time with Maggie, singing the same lullabies he had sung to Emily when she was little. Grandpa, she smiles when you sing, Emily noted, watching Robert with the baby in his arms. It's because she recognizes the melody. Margaret used to sing these same songs to you, Robert replied, emotional. By 6 months, Maggie already reacted to her grandfather's voice. Whenever Robert arrived, she stretched out her little arms to him. Daddy, I think she loves you more than me, Emily teased. Impossible, sweetheart. But I confess this grandfatherly love is unlike anything I've ever felt. Robert started taking Maggie to visit the school where he worked. The students in the Cooking Memories program were enchanted by the baby. Professor, what a beautiful granddaughter, exclaimed Mrs. Rose, gently stroking the child's cheek. Thank you, Mrs. Rose. She's the light of my life. Professor, said Mr. David, now I understand why you've been glowing lately. It's a grandfather's love. Robert smiled, feeling complete. He had the work he loved, a wonderful family, and now a granddaughter who brought even more meaning to his life. But his happiness was interrupted by unexpected news. Catherine from the foundation called with concern. Robert, we need to talk urgently. What happened, Catherine? I'd rather speak in person. Can you come here today? Robert grew worried. From Catherine's tone, he could tell something was wrong. Arriving at the foundation, he was met by Catherine's serious expression. Robert, sit down. I have difficult news. Go ahead, Catherine. I'm prepared. The foundation is facing a financial crisis. Our main sponsors have withdrawn their support. Robert felt a chill in his stomach. What does this mean for the program? It means we'll have to suspend Cooking Memories indefinitely. The news hit like a bolt of lightning. Robert couldn't believe it. Suspend it? But Catherine, we have 200 enrolled students, people who depend on this program. I know, Robert. I'm devastated, but we don't have the resources to keep it running. Isn't there anything we can do? We're trying to find new sponsors, but it will take time, at least 6 months. Robert left the foundation shattered. How would he tell his students the program was being suspended? At home, he spoke to Margaret's photo. Margaret, my love, I don't know what to do. 200 people will lose the program that changed their lives. The phone rang. It was Mrs. Rose. Professor, I heard the news. We're all heartbroken. Me too, Mrs. Rose. I didn't see this coming. Professor, we can't let the program die like this. But Mrs. Rose, without sponsorship, there's no way to keep it going. Professor, what if we organized ourselves? Everyone contributing a little. It would be too much money, Mrs. Rose. I don't want you all to sacrifice yourselves. Professor, this program is worth any sacrifice. He gave life back to so many people. Mrs. Rose's phone call planted an idea in Robert's head. What if it were really possible to keep the program running with contributions from the students themselves? The next day, he called a meeting with all the participants of Cooking Memories. Everyone, you already know the situation. The program will be suspended due to lack of funds, Robert announced, his voice heavy. A sad murmur filled the room. But before we give up, I want to hear from you. What do you think about trying to keep the program going on our own? Mr. David raised his hand. Professor, I'll pay whatever it takes to continue. This program saved me from depression. Me too, shouted Mrs. Rose. I'd rather tighten my belt, but keep learning. Other students spoke up in agreement. Everyone was willing to contribute to keep the program alive. Everyone, I'm moved by your determination, but I have to be realistic. It would take $500 per person per month. The amount was high for most of them. Some faces fell. Professor, said a new student named Constance, what if we did something to raise money? Like what? We could hold events, sell food, do raffles. Together, we can do it. The idea energized the group. Suggestions started pouring in. We could do homemade food fairs, raffle off ready-made dishes, private lessons, small catering for events. Robert was moved by their enthusiasm. Everyone, if you're willing to fight, so am I. Let's try. And so began the most challenging phase of Robert's life. At 70 years old, he had to reinvent everything all over again. The first event was a homemade food fair in the town square. Each student prepared a different dish to sell. Professor, I brought 50 homemade loaves of bread, said Mrs. Rose, carrying a basket. I made 100 pastries, announced Mr. David. And I made 2 pots of chicken soup, said Constance. Robert had made his famous bean and noodle soup. Within 2 hours, everything was sold out. Professor, we raised $1,200, Mrs. Rose said excitedly. That's wonderful, but we still need much more. Then let's do more fairs, Mr. David said firmly. For 3 months, the group worked tirelessly on fundraising. They held weekly fairs, sold meal boxes, and offered private lessons. Robert was exhausted. Between his work at the academy with Michael and now dedicating every weekend to fundraising, he was stretched thin. Dad, you're working yourself to death, Patricia worried. You're not young enough for this much effort. Sweetheart, I can't let these people down. They're counting on me. Dad, but you need to take care of your health too. Patricia was right. Robert was feeling more tired, but he didn't want to give up. One day during a fair, he suddenly felt ill. Dizzy, he had to sit down. Professor, what's wrong? Mrs. Rose shouted, rushing to help him. It's probably just exhaustion. I'm fine. Professor, you're going to the hospital right now, Mr. David said firmly. At the hospital, the doctor was clear. Mr. Robert, your blood pressure is very high. You're pushing yourself too hard for your age. Doctor, I have to work. A lot of people depend on me. I understand, but if you don't slow down, you could face serious health problems. The doctor prescribed medication and recommended rest. Robert left the hospital worried. How was he going to keep up with all his commitments? Patricia and Stephen were waiting in the hallway. Dad, what did the doctor say? He said I need to rest a little. Then rest. No more fairs or events for now, Patricia said firmly. But sweetheart, no buts. Your health comes first. Robert had to accept. He called Mrs. Rose and explained the situation. Professor, don't worry. We'll manage on our own for a while. But Mrs. Rose, you all can't organize everything without me. Yes, we can. You taught us to be independent, remember? For 2 weeks, Robert stayed home resting. Emily visited him daily with Maggie. Is Grandpa feeling sad? She teased, making the baby talk to Robert. I'm not sad, my dear granddaughter. Just worried about Grandpa's friends. Dad, your students are doing just fine. They called today to say the weekend fair was a success. Really? Really? They raised over $1,000 without you. The news made Robert proud and relieved. His students were putting into practice everything he had taught them about independence and teamwork. When he returned to work, he found the group more united and organized than ever. Professor, they all shouted when they saw him arriving. "How is everyone? I missed you." "We missed you too, Professor, but look what we managed to do," said Mrs. Rose, showing a spreadsheet. In 2 weeks, they had raised $3,000. They were organized into committees. One handled the fairs, another the raffles, and another the promotions. "Everyone, I'm impressed. You're more organized than I am." "That's because we learned from the best teacher," said Mr. David, smiling. "Professor," said Constance, "we have a proposal." "What proposal?" "We want you to just be our advisor. We'll take care of the operational side." "What do you mean?" "You'll be responsible for the classes and educational guidance. We'll handle all the financial and organizational parts." The proposal was tempting. It would greatly reduce Robert's workload. "But can you really handle it?" "We can. Look at our organization," said Mrs. Rose, showing a detailed schedule. They had divided all the tasks. Who was responsible for each fair, who handled the raffles, who managed social media promotions. "In fact, Professor, we even created a Facebook page for the program," said a young student named Samantha. "A Facebook page?" "Yes. We already have 500 followers, and we've sold a lot of food through online orders." Robert was amazed by the group's progress. They had become true social entrepreneurs. "All right, I accept the proposal. You take over management, and I'll handle the educational side." The new structure worked perfectly. In 3 months, they raised enough money to officially restart the program. "Professor," announced Mrs. Rose in a meeting, "we did it. We have funds for 6 months of the program." Everyone celebrated emotionally. They had proven that it was possible to keep the dream alive through unity and determination. The story of the students' mobilization reached the local newspapers. A reporter approached Robert for an interview. "Professor Robert, how do you feel seeing your students take the initiative to save the program?" "I feel proud and moved. They proved that quality education creates independent and proactive people." "What do you think motivated this mobilization?" "The love for learning and the understanding that knowledge transforms lives. They didn't want to lose this opportunity for growth." The article had a big impact. Several local businesses became interested in sponsoring the program. "Professor," called Catherine from the foundation, "did you see the companies that want to sponsor the program?" "Yes, Catherine. What joy!" "There are 5 interested companies. We can not only restart the program but also expand it to other cities." "Expand?" "Yes. We have requests from Tucson, Eugene, and even Washington." The prospect of expansion excited Robert, but also worried him. It would be a big responsibility. "Catherine, I need to think carefully about this. I don't want to compromise the program's quality." "Of course, Robert, but think about the impact we could have. Thousands of people could benefit." Robert talked to Emily about the proposal. "Dad, it's an incredible opportunity, but only accept it if it won't compromise your health. It's just that it would involve a lot of travel, a lot of responsibility." "Dad, what if you trained other teachers, created a methodology others could apply?" Emily's idea was excellent. Robert could train multipliers of his methodology. "Daughter, you always have the best ideas. I learned from the best, Dad." Robert decided to accept the proposal, but on the condition that he first trained a team of teacher multipliers. "Catherine, I accept expanding the program, but let's do it in a structured way." "How so?" "I'll create a training course for teachers. They'll learn our methodology and be able to replicate it in other cities." "Perfect. How much time do you need to prepare this?" 6 months. I want to create a complete course with theory and practice. The training course was a new challenge for Robert. He needed to systematize everything he had learned intuitively. "Michael," he said to his partner at the academy, "I need your help structuring this course." "Of course, Professor. It'll be an honor to help." "I need to turn everything I do by instinct into a methodology." Together, they created a 40-hour training program divided into theoretical and practical modules. "Professor," Michael said during development, "do you realize you're creating something revolutionary?" "How so?" "An education methodology that combines technique, affection, and social transformation. This doesn't exist anywhere else in the world." Robert hadn't grasped the importance of what he was doing. To him, it was just a way of teaching with care. The first training course had 20 participants from various cities. Among them was Jason, the young man who had defended Robert during the humiliations with Michael. "Professor Robert, what a joy to be here," Jason said, hugging him. "Jason, so good to see you, my dear. I heard you became a professional chef." "I did. And now I want to learn to teach the way you do." "I'm deeply honored, Jason." During the course, Robert realized how hard it was to convey something he did naturally. "Everyone, teaching with affection isn't a technique you memorize. It's an attitude toward life," he explained. "But Professor, how do we develop this attitude?" one participant asked. "It starts with understanding that every student has a story, a background, a dignity that must be respected. And how do we apply that in practice? By looking each student in the eye, genuinely caring about their struggles, celebrating their achievements no matter how small." Jason actively participated in the discussions. "Professor, I remember when you were being humiliated by Michael. Even then, you never lost your dignity or your desire to learn." "That's right, Jason, because I learned our worth doesn't depend on others' opinions, but on our own conscience. That's what inspired me to become a teacher too." The course was a success. By the end, all participants were ready to replicate the methodology in their cities. "Professor," said a participant from Washington, "I can't wait to start the program there." Remember, technique can be taught, but love is transmitted. Be examples of care and dedication. 3 months later, there were already Cooking Memories programs running in 7 cities. The results were astonishing. "Professor," called the coordinator from Eugene, "our program already has a waiting list. Students are moved by the methodology." "What joy! How are the local teachers reacting?" "They're amazed. They say they've never seen students so motivated and engaged." Similar stories came from all the cities where the program had been implemented. A year after the expansion, Robert was invited to a national education event to present his methodology. "Professor Robert," said the event organizer, "your methodology is revolutionizing senior education in the country." "I'm deeply honored, but I confess I'm still surprised by this response." "Professor, don't you see the impact of your work? Over 1,000 people have already been directly helped." The number stunned Robert. 1,000 lives transformed through a methodology born from his love for Margaret and cooking. On the day of the presentation, the auditorium was packed. Educators from across the country wanted to learn about the methodology. "Good afternoon," Robert began, now more confident in public speaking. "5 years ago, I was just a lost widower who couldn't even fry an egg." The audience laughed, immediately connecting with his humility. "Today, I'm here to share something I've learned. True education happens when we touch the heart before teaching the mind." Robert told his story, from the humiliations with Chef Michael to creating the Cooking Memories program. Cooking was just the means. The goal was always to restore dignity, purpose, and joy to people society often overlooks. The crowd was visibly moved. "I've learned that when we teach with love, we don't just share knowledge. We plant seeds of change that keep growing long after the lesson ends." At the end, the standing ovation was thunderous. Many educators approached, eager to learn more. "Professor," said one from Chicago, "I'd love to bring your program to our institution. It'd be my pleasure to help. But remember, the technique isn't what matters, it's the love." On his way home, Robert felt fulfilled yet nostalgic. At 72, he'd achieved more than he ever imagined. "Margaret, my love," he said to her photo, "I think I've not only fulfilled your dream of seeing me cook, but something even greater." Just then, Emily called. "Dad, did you see the coverage of your talk? It's in several papers." "I did, sweetheart. I still can't believe it." "Dad, can I say something? Mom would be so proud of the man you've become." "Thank you, dear. Sometimes I feel like she's guiding me through all this." "She absolutely is, Dad. And you know what? I think it's time you considered writing a book." "A book? About what?" "Your story, your methodology. It'd be a way to preserve your knowledge." The idea had never crossed Robert's mind. "Honey, I barely finished high school. How could I write a book?" "Dad, you don't need a degree to tell your story. and I can help with the technical part." Emily's suggestion planted a seed. Maybe it really was time to document this journey. Weeks later, Robert was at the academy working with Michael when he got an unexpected call. "Professor Robert, this is Jennifer. Remember me?" "Jennifer, of course, my first supporter at school. How are you?" "I'm great, Professor. Actually, I'm calling with a proposal." "What proposal?" "I work for a publisher now, and I'd love to propose publishing your story." Robert was stunned. What a coincidence, right after his talk with Emily. "Publish my story?" "Yes. Your journey is inspiring. It'd be a book about resilience, education, and love." "Jennifer, I'm flattered, but I'm not sure I can write a book." "Professor, you wouldn't have to do it alone. We'd have a team to help. You'd just share your story." The offer was tempting, but Robert still hesitated. "Can I think about it?" "Of course, Professor. No rush." That night, Robert spoke at length to Margaret's photo. "Margaret, my love, should I write a book? Does our story deserve to be told?" As always, the breeze coming through the window felt like a tender reply. "I think you're saying yes, aren't you?" He smiled. The next day, he called Jennifer to accept the proposal. The process of creating the book was emotional. Jennifer visited Robert weekly to record conversations about his story. "Professor, tell me about the day you met Margaret," she'd ask. Robert would smile and begin recounting, reliving each precious moment. "It was at a church festival. She was selling hot cider, and I was enchanted by her smile." "And how was your first date?" "I invited her for ice cream. We talked for 3 hours. I left knowing I'd marry her." Every recording session was an emotional journey. Robert revisited happy moments with Margaret, but also relived the pain of loss. "Professor," Jennifer said during one session, "do you realize your story is proof it's possible to start over at any age?" "Maybe it is, Jennifer. Before Margaret passed, I thought my life was over." "And what changed?" "I realized she wouldn't want to see me standing still without purpose. She always encouraged me to discover my talents." The book took 6 months to complete. When Jennifer brought the first copy, Robert was moved. Love's Seasoning, the story of the professor who learned to teach from the heart. He read the title on the cover. "Do you like it, Professor?" "I love it." "But will people really be interested in my story?" "I'm sure they will, Professor. It's a story of love, resilience, and transformation." The book launch was scheduled at the school where it all began. Sarah, the coordinator, insisted on organizing the event. "Robert, it's an honor to host your book launch," she said. "You're a source of pride for our school." On the night of the launch, the auditorium was packed. Former and current students, teachers, family, and people inspired by Robert's story were all there. "Everyone," he began, visibly emotional. "I never imagined I'd one day be here launching a book about my life." The audience listened with warmth and attention. "This book is a tribute to my beloved Margaret, who always believed in me more than I believed in myself. But it's also a tribute to all of you, who taught me that education is an act of mutual love." Mrs. Rose sat in the front row, crying with emotion. "Professor, you changed our lives," she called out. "No, Mrs. Rose, you changed mine. You taught me it's worth fighting for our dreams." After the event, many people bought the book and asked for autographs. Robert felt fulfilled seeing their affection. "Professor," a young man said, "your story inspired me not to give up on my dreams." "That's wonderful. Remember, it's never too late to start over and never too early to dream." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing, in the following weeks, the book received an overwhelming response. The first 1,000 copies sold out in 2 weeks. "Professor," Jennifer called, excited, "we'll need a second printing. The book is a success." "Really? I can't believe it." And there's more. We've received invitations for launches in other cities. The book's impact brought even more visibility to Robert's work. Schools from other states reached out to adopt his methodology. One day he received a call that deeply moved him. "Professor Robert, this is Michael. Michael, how are you? It's been a while. I'm well, Professor. Actually, I called to thank you. Thank me for what this time? I read your book, and I finally understood the depth of the change you brought to my life. Michael shared that his diner had become a local favorite, known for its warm service and food made with love. Professor, today I have 15 employees, and you know what sets us apart? What? They're all trained in the philosophy you taught me, cooking and serving with love. How wonderful, Michael. I'm so proud. Professor, may I ask a favor? Of course. I'd love for you to visit my new location. I opened a second diner, and the name is a tribute to you. A tribute to me? Yes, it's called Love's Seasoning, just like the title of your book. Robert was deeply moved by the gesture. Michael, it would be an honor to visit. The following Saturday, Robert went to see Michael's new diner. He was impressed by the welcoming atmosphere and the staff's kind service. Professor, welcome to Love's Seasoning, Michael said proudly. Michael, what a beautiful place and such good energy. It's because we cook with love here, just like you taught me. Michael introduced Robert to the entire team, sharing how he had transformed his approach to cooking and service. Everyone, this is Professor Robert, the man who taught me that cooking is an act of love. The staff greeted Robert warmly and with gratitude. Professor, said a young employee, Chef Michael always tells us your story. It's so inspiring. Thank you, dear. I'm happy to know our story can inspire others. During lunch, Robert tasted several dishes prepared by the team. Each one had something special, a seasoning that went beyond ingredients. Michael, the food here truly tastes like care, Robert said. It's because everyone here understands that serving food is serving love, Professor. At the end of the visit, Michael made an unexpected proposal. Professor, I have a dream. What dream? I want to create a chain of Love's Seasoning diners in different cities, all following the philosophy you taught me. What an interesting idea. And I'd love for you to be my consultant, help train the teams in the philosophy of love in cooking. Michael's offer was tempting, but Robert already had many commitments. Michael, I'm honored by the invitation, but my schedule is already very full. Professor, it wouldn't have to be full-time. Maybe just monthly workshops for the teams. Robert considered the proposal. It would be a way to spread the philosophy of love in cooking even further. You know what? Let's give it a try. But slowly, no rush. And so Robert embarked on another professional adventure. At 73, he became a consultant for a diner chain. In the following months, his life grew even busier. Between his show Cooking Memories, the Academy with Michael, school lectures, and now consulting for Love's Seasoning, his days were full. Dad, don't you think you're overdoing it? Emily worried. Sweetheart, I feel good. And it's so rewarding to see so many lives changed. But Dad, you need to rest too, and enjoy time with your granddaughter. Emily was right. Maggie was already 2 years old and growing fast. Robert didn't want to miss precious moments with her. You're right, dear. I'll slow down a bit. Robert decided to delegate more responsibilities. At the academy, he trained other teachers in his methods. For Cooking Memories, the students took on much of the management. Professor, Mrs. Rose said, you don't need to worry. We've learned to stand on our own. I'm so proud to see you all so independent. With more free time, Robert could focus on his granddaughter. Maggie already tried to help Grandpa in the kitchen. Grandpa, I want to cook too, she said in her childlike way. Of course, my darling, let's bake a cake together. Robert would stand her on a chair beside him and let her help stir the batter. Like this, Margaret. Stir gently, just like Grandpa taught you. Emily watched from afar, moved. Dad, she loves cooking with you. She's just like great-grandma Margaret. She had a passion for the kitchen since she was little. I think we have a chef in the family. The calmer routine did Robert good. He was more energetic and happy. One day, he received a call that left him deeply emotional. Professor Robert, this is the State Department of Education. How can I help? We'd like to invite you to a special ceremony. What ceremony? You'll be receiving the title of Educator of the Year for your work with seniors. Robert couldn't believe what he was hearing. Educator of the Year. But I don't even have a degree in education. Professor, you've revolutionized education for seniors. You more than deserve it. The ceremony would be in 3 weeks in the state capital. Robert grew nervous about the responsibility. Emily, I don't know if I deserve this title, he told his daughter. Dad, of course you do. Look at all the lives you've changed. But honey, there are so many more qualified people than me. Dad, qualifications aren't just about degrees. It's about sensitivity, dedication, love. And in that, you're a doctor. On the day of the ceremony, Robert looked elegant in a navy blue suit Emily had bought especially for the occasion. Dad, you look wonderful. Mom would be so proud, she said, adjusting his tie. The event was held in the capital's main theatre. About 500 people filled the audience, educators, officials, family members. When they announced Robert's name, he stepped onto the stage, overcome with emotion. In the crowd, he saw many familiar faces. Mrs. Rose, Mr. David, Jennifer, Michael, Jason, and so many others who had been part of his journey. Professor Robert Johnson Smith, said the Secretary of Education, for your pioneering work in humanized education for seniors, for the transformative impact of your methodology, and for proving that education is, above all, an act of love, we award you the title of Educator of the Year. The audience rose in applause. Robert accepted the plaque with trembling hands. Thank you, he began, his voice breaking. This award isn't just mine. It belongs to everyone who believed a 65-year-old man could learn and teach. The audience listened in respectful silence. It belongs to my beloved Margaret, who taught me that love is the ingredient that makes any recipe work. It belongs to my dear students, who taught me that learning has no age and that teaching is a privilege. When he stepped off the stage, he was surrounded by well-wishers. Mrs. Rose wept with emotion. Professor, you deserve this and so much more. Thank you, Mrs. Rose. Without all of you, none of this would be possible. That night at home, Robert placed the plaque in the living room next to Margaret's photo. Margaret, my love, we did it, he said, moved. We turned our pain into love, our loss into purpose. 2 years later, at 75, Robert decided it was time to retire for good. Everyone, he announced at a meeting with all his colleagues, the time has come to pass the torch to you. Professor, but you can't retire, protested Mrs. Rose. Oh, but I can, my dear, and I'll be so proud watching you carry on this work. Robert had carefully prepared his succession. At the academy, Michael would fully take over the educational side. For the Cooking Memories program, a council formed by the students themselves would handle management. You don't need me anymore, he said, smiling. You've learned to fly on your own. The farewell party was emotional. Hundreds of people whose lives Robert had touched came to say goodbye. Professor, said Jason, who now ran a culinary school in Chicago, you changed my life forever. Jason, you're the one who changed mine. You taught me that planting knowledge reaps transformation. Emily organized a film with testimonials from all the people Robert had touched over the years. When he watched it, he wept openly. Dad, said Emily, do you see how many lives you've changed? It was God using this old man to do his work, my dear. It wasn't just God, Dad, it was your generous heart, your dedication, your love. In retirement, Robert could finally devote himself fully to his family. Maggie, now 4 years old, was his constant companion. Grandpa, will you teach me how to make cookies? She'd ask. Of course, my little granddaughter. Let's make great-grandma Margaret's cookies. Robert had adapted all of Margaret's recipes so Maggie could help. The little girl adored being in the kitchen with her grandpa. Grandpa, she asked one day, why do you always talk about Grandma Margaret when you cook? Because she was the one who taught me that food made with love is the tastiest in the world, my dear. Can I meet her? She's right here, Robert said, pointing to his heart. Every time we cook with care, Grandma Margaret is with us. A year after retiring, Robert received news that moved him deeply. Emily was pregnant again. Dad, we're having another baby, she announced, beaming. What joy, my dear. I'll have another grandchild to teach how to cook. Dad, if it's a boy, we'll name him Robert Johnson, just like Grandpa. Emily, you don't have to... Yes, I do, Dad. I want to honor the name of a man who dedicated his life to transforming others. 8 months later, Robert Johnson Smith Jr. was born. Grandpa was overcome with emotion as he held his grandson for the first time. "Hello, my little grandson," he whispered. "Grandpa has so much to teach you when you grow up." With 2 grandchildren, Robert's life grew even richer. Maggie, now 5, loved helping take care of her baby brother. "Grandpa," she'd say when Bobby grows up, "can we teach him to cook too?" "Of course, my dear. We'll teach him everything Great-Grandma Margaret taught me." At 77, Robert was living his golden years. He had the family he loved, recognition for his work, and the satisfaction of having transformed hundreds of lives. One day, while baking a cake with Maggie in the kitchen, she asked him a surprising question. "Grandpa, are you happy?" Robert stopped stirring the batter and looked at his granddaughter. "I'm very happy, my dear. Happier than I ever imagined possible." "Why?" "Because I've learned that happiness isn't about having everything we want, but about giving meaning to what we do." "I don't understand, Grandpa." Robert laughed at her honesty. "You'll understand when you're older. Just know that Grandpa is happy because he has you and because he can make a difference in people's lives." "Like you did at school." "That's right, my clever girl." That night, after putting the grandchildren to bed, Robert sat in his favorite armchair and spoke to Margaret's photo one last time in our story. "Margaret, my eternal love," he said, smiling. "We did it. We turned our love story into a story of transformation. Who would have thought that lost man who could barely fry an egg would become a teacher, writer, consultant? But you know what I'm proudest of? Not the titles or the recognition. It's knowing our story inspired so many people not to give up on their dreams. And now we have our grandchildren to carry on our story. Maggie already shows the same passion for cooking you had. Thank you, my love, for planting the seed in me that grew into the man I became. I know you're proud." A gentle breeze drifted through the window, rustling the curtains, as always happened when Robert spoke to Margaret. "I know you're here, my love. And I promise to keep taking care of our family and honoring our story for as long as God gives me life." Robert looked around the room where they had shared so many happy moments. On the walls were family photos, diplomas and awards, the published book. A full life built on the foundation of love. The next day, Robert woke up with a special feeling. It was Sunday, and Emily would come over for lunch with the family. "Dad, what are we cooking today?" she asked when she arrived. "How about making your mother's feijoada? It's been a while since I made it." "Great idea, and the kids can help." Maggie was thrilled. "I want to help, Grandpa. Teach me." "Of course, my little granddaughter. First, we'll sort the beans." Robert showed his granddaughter how to pick the good beans, just as Margaret had once taught him. "Like this, Maggie, only the nice whole ones." "Why, Grandpa?" "Because good food starts with ingredients chosen with care." As they cooked together, 4 generations connected, Margaret through her recipes, Robert passing on knowledge, Emily watching fondly, and Maggie absorbing everything with curiosity. "Dad," Emily said, "Mom would be so happy seeing this." "She is watching, my dear. She's here in every seasoning, in every loving gesture." When the feijoada was ready, the whole family gathered around the table. Robert said a prayer of gratitude. "Lord, thank you for this blessed family, for this food that nourishes our bodies and souls, and for Margaret's loving presence, still watching over us." "Amen," everyone replied. During lunch, Maggie made a declaration that moved them all. "Grandpa, when I grow up, I want to be just like you." "How so, my little granddaughter?" "I want to teach people to cook with love, just like you did." Robert was deeply touched. "My dear, if you do that, you'll make your grandpa very proud. And Grandma Margaret too. Grandma Margaret most of all, sweetheart." After lunch, while the family relaxed in the living room, Robert reflected on his journey. From a lost and humiliated man, he had become an educator, writer, consultant, and above all, a devoted grandfather. "Emily," he said to his daughter, "can I tell you something?" "Of course, Dad." "Today, I felt like I've completed my mission on Earth. Dad, don't say that. It's not pessimism, my dear. It's gratitude. I've honored your mother's memory, transformed lives, created a methodology that will keep helping people, and seen our family thrive. Dad, your mission will never end. The grandkids still have so much to learn from you. That's true, my dear, and I'll be here to teach them everything I know. At dusk, when Emily left with the children, Robert was alone in the house. But he didn't feel lonely. He felt surrounded by all the good memories, by all the lives he had touched, by all the love he had planted. Before bed, he went to the kitchen and looked at the tools that had witnessed his transformation. The pot where he made his first successful soup, the knife he learned to use after 70, the apron he wore in class. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for being instruments of my change." And so, at 77 years old, Robert Johnson Smith could look back with pride and forward with hope. He had proven that it's never too late to start over, never too late to learn, never too late to turn pain into purpose. His story would live on in every student who learned to cook with love, in every teacher who applied his methods, in every person inspired by his example of resilience. And most of all, it would live on in little Maggie, who already showed she had inherited not just the talent for cooking, but above all the love that should season every recipe in life. The next morning, Robert woke up early, as always. He prepared his breakfast, thinking of all the flavors he had discovered throughout his life. Not just the flavors of food, but the flavors of friendship, recognition, family love, and professional fulfillment. Sitting at the kitchen table, gazing at the photo of Margaret on the refrigerator, he smiled with gratitude. He had managed to turn an ending into a story of new beginnings. He had proven that life always offers a second chance to those brave enough to seize it. And most importantly, he had discovered that the true seasoning of any recipe, whether in the kitchen or in life, is love. Love for family, love for his students, love for knowledge, love for the opportunity to make a difference. Robert Johnson Smith had found his recipe for happiness, a generous dose of purpose, a pinch of courage, spices of perseverance and patience, but above all, lots and lots of love. End of story. Now, tell us what you thought of the story and where you're reading from. If you have something to share with us, leave a heartfelt comment. Do you think Robert made the right decisions along his journey? We'd love to hear your thoughts on this story of resilience and love. Thank you so much for being with us.